Currently, the Bird Star is a large planet consisting of several countries. There were two large countries on the board, the Choi country and the Lee country. These great countries often fought for their territory. The winner in this war is the one who has the strongest fighting spirit, as he has the ability to destroy heaven and earth. Only those who have the mighty guardian spirit, the spirit of war, can change their destiny and become heroes who can resist 10,000 people. 5 years ago, the powerful country of Lee and the virtual country of Choi began a war for territory. Steve's father, a member of the country's most powerful organization, Assassination, became a traitor in the war. In the midst of a war against another state, he killed 2 high-ranking war heroes of an assassination organization. Then, the Lee country was defeated and took second place, and the virtual Choi country became the first. Steve's father's reputation was damaged overnight. His whereabouts were unknown, and his family was kept under strict surveillance in the village. Steve became cold-blooded after he and his mother were intimidated and rejected by their relatives and everyone they knew. 5 years have passed. It was a sunny summer day. Dragonflies and butterflies were flying outside, and birds were singing. Steve had already grown a little, but he was not happy with either the weather or the sun. 2 guys quarreled. They started arguing. One of them clearly did not want to fight, but the second was clearly eager to show his strength and superiority that day. Before anyone even had time to understand anything, the instigator of the quarrel flew away. Those standing nearby stared in surprise in the direction where someone else had appeared. When he fell, everyone saw that Steve was standing in front of them. He punched the guy, causing him to fall. He still clenched his hand into a fist, and his eyes were filled with anger. The guys gathered around Steve. They surrounded him, but he was still ready to defend himself. "Come on," the guy said to the guys surrounding him. Taking an attack pose, a certain force appeared in his hands, glowing blue. Everyone who watched him was a little scared. They knew whose son he was. They knew what to expect from him. None of them were interested in striking up a conversation or making friends with him. "You, son of a traitor! What's the matter? Your father betrayed the country! Damn you! You deserve to die!" One of the group of guys named Greg shouted furiously at Steve. From the look on his face, you could tell how much he hated him. The guy was used to hearing all this, but still, every time these words caused pain in him, mixed with anger and aggression. After all, he heard this almost every day. "What? You don't want to admit it? Then see if someone can come to your aid!" Greg shouted again. He knew that no one would support Steve and no one would stand up for him. Steve looked around. He knew that no one would stand up for him, but some small hope inside him still made him turn his head and look at the people. Everyone who was watching the group of guys began to whisper. Some of them were simply minding their own business, but most of them directed their hateful glances at Steve. "Vile degenerate," one of the women whispered in the man's ear. There was hatred in their eyes for this guy, and it hurt him very much. Steve, at that moment, remembered all the offensive words that he had heard addressed to him. Every time he passed people, they tried to remind him how insignificant he was. "Come on, I'm tired of waiting." He returned from his thoughts again, because he never lost heart. Greg was also not going to give up. He was ready to kill Steve. Gathering all his anger, Greg called on his strength. "Even if you have a fighting spirit, you are not alone. Moreover, my brother is a level 2 war hero at Jiangying College, so I'm warning you, don't you dare touch me," Greg shouted, watching Steve summon his fighting spirit. "You are rubbing some kind of bullshit into me," Steve answered, and the strength of fighting spirit appeared in his hands. "Let's finish quickly. It's time for me to go home for dinner," Steve said, killing Greg with his gaze. "Go to hell!" Greg shouted, and 3 of his friends rushed at the guy with him. Steve saw the guys approaching him. His gaze was focused on them. He exhaled, preparing to defend himself. Steve felt all his anger in his hands. It gave him strength and turned into a fighting spirit. Having gathered all his strength, his hands were saturated with energy. He was ready to fight the offenders. He began to run towards Greg. He picked up speed. He no longer felt the ground under his feet. Greg's face appeared in front of him, and Steve realized that if he slowed down even a little, he would get hit in the face first. "How dare you come here? Taste my fist!" Greg shouted and swung his fist right in front of Steve's face. Steve dodged Greg's fist, which disoriented him a little. Steve's hand straightened and hit the guy right in the neck. "Gotcha!" He grinned and squeezed Greg's neck. Still holding him by the neck, he hooked his leg with his. And with all his strength, Steve knocked Greg to the ground, holding it with your weight. "Now all I have to do is hit you in the throat with my fist or finger. Even without using the guardian spirit in you, you'll be dead," Steve threatened Greg. "Do you want to continue?" Steve asked, still holding Greg. No, he gave up. He found it difficult to breathe due to Steve's grip. "I don't want to fight anymore," Greg wheezed through a cough. "Then get lost and don't show your face to me again," Steve warned Greg as he left. "Are you okay? Let me help you." The guys watching all this rushed to Greg. Greg sat down slowly. He looked angry. The guy clearly didn't want to leave it like that. "Steve, you will pay for this!" Greg shouted after him. "Mom, I'm back." The guy entered the house. He immediately saw that his mother was sitting on the floor and collecting fragments from dishes and things that had been broken. The whole room was turned over. Fragments were lying on the floor. Furniture was broken. All things were scattered. "Mom," he quietly called out to the woman. She was lost in thought as she cleaned up. She was a little scared until she realized that it was him. "You're back. Wait a second. Your mother will quickly finish cleaning and come." The woman immediately began to smile when she saw her son. "Are the villagers causing trouble again?" he asked her. This wasn't the first time someone was bored and could come and turn their whole house upside down. "Tell me again, why should we be responsible for Dad? He was angry at what they had to go through every day, even if he betrayed the country." Anger at his father for such injustice arose in him again. "Why didn't he take us with him?" he asked, and his mother came up to him. The woman hugged her son to her, calming him down, stroking his hair. "Steve, your father did not hand over the organization or the country." His mother smiled, still hugging her son to her. As soon as he mentioned his father, his mother's voice began to tremble. "You always say that, do we?" Steve whispered to her. It was already evening outside the window. A bright moon was shining in the sky. Somewhere in the distance, you could hear dragonflies and grasshoppers. The guy was lying in his room and looking at the portrait of the hero, glued to the ceiling right above him. He extended his hand towards the portrait of Phoenix, a member of the most powerful organization in the country, the Assassination Organization. In the war against the 5 dynasties, he killed 500 people single-handedly with his 100 birds fighting spirit. He is one of the 5 most powerful heroes of the war. Steve looked at the portrait of Phoenix with respect. He knew everything about him, he admired him and his strength. Steve dreamed of being just like his favorite hero. "I would like to meet such a hero at least once in my life, Anisai," the guy said dreamily. And Dad, too. He thought about his father. At that time, he was a war hero and a member of the murder organization. Steve remembered when he was little, his father always played with him. He remembered his smile. He missed his father. The guy lay there for some time, remembering the pleasant moments spent with his father, the time they spent together playing. He heard some sound. "Who is there?" Steve asked, jumping out of bed. He looked out the window and was filled with anger that people were still trying to do something to them at night. "I'm not going to put up with this anymore," the guy said, losing control. He went out onto the porch of the house. It was dark on the street. The guy didn't see anyone. "Come out, insects!" He called those who were hiding from him behind the trees. He was sure that someone was standing there. Greg came out from behind one of the trees. He smiled, clearly planning something, showing it with all his appearance. Steve and Greg came out to meet each other in the middle of the yard. "You! Do you really want me to beat you again?" Steve asked Greg. "I told you that you will pay!" he snapped, not intending to leave or give up. Steve couldn't contain his anger. He gritted his teeth and clenched his hands into fists, his body and mind tense. "Get out!" Steve warned, his hands ready for battle. "From here!" Steve decided to attack Greg first. His feet left the ground and he moved towards him with all the speed he could muster, using his fighting strength. But he stood still and there was a nasty smile on his face. He did not try to run away or shorten himself. "Insect!" Steve shouted and swung his fist at Greg. "Brother!" Greg called his brother, who was apparently hiding somewhere nearby behind one of the trees, but was watching their altercation. Steve clearly didn't expect Greg's brother to be here. Greg was waiting for his brother to do something. He looked like the winner in this fight. A huge fist appeared near him, clearly not a human one, and it was aimed at Steve. "Fist?" Steve was confused for a second when he realized that it was heading straight towards him. "Strike!" Steve flew several meters away. It was painful. Greg and his brother stood and smiled evilly. The revenge was a success. Behind the brothers was the fighting spirit of Brother Greg. The monster had the head of a huge dog and large, sharp teeth. The spirit's body was large and strong. Every inch of the body had a muscular shape. "Brother, did he offend you?" his brother asked Greg. "Yes, it's him. My brother is a second-year student at the National Military College. He won't spare you." Greg laughed, turning to Steve. "Move, buddy, I can't move!" Steve wheezed, trying to get up. "This is the strength of a real soldier. Your brother complained about you again. He said you were hurting him, loser." Luke held his spirit behind him, ready to attack again. Don't even think about mercy. Die, Luke continued. Steve was still lying on the ground. It was hard for him to breathe. He could not answer anything. He just thought, if not for him. Brother, kill him! Steve heard Greg's voice. Kill him! He must die! Nobody cares about him or his mother. Greg did not let up, egging his brother on. Kill him! No one will know about it. There was only cruelty in his eyes. Maybe people will praise you as a hero! Greg smiled evilly. You're right, Luke agreed, giving in under his brother's pressure. Steve couldn't even breathe at that time. He did not believe that this could be true, that in a moment he could simply be gone. Don't blame me, blame your father. Luke turned to him. I will grind you into powder. Luke's spirit was ready to carry out the order. He was waiting for the command. Greg was happy. He couldn't wait for Luke to kill Steve. Steve was still lying there, unable to move or even say anything. He could only think. Memories were all he had left. Luke ordered the spirit to kill Steve, and he attacked the guy with his powerful force. Oh, what a strength! Luke rejoiced, watching his spirit and admiring it. Hey! Hey! He turned into minced meat. The spirit continued its attack on Steve, but because of the dust, nothing was visible. Where did he disappear to? Do you see him? Is there really nothing left of him at all? The brothers stood over the place where Steve had recently been lying. At this place, a hole was formed from the impact of the fighting spirit. Brother, this! Greg was a little worried. What? Luke asked. He was furious. A feather flew near Luke's face. A silent question mixed with surprise was read on the guy's face. Another feather fell from the sky, and another, and another. Feathers fell like rain. They were bright red. The brothers watched in silence. Greg and Luke raised their heads up. They were at a loss to understand what was happening. A guy descended from the sky towards them. He had red wings and long blonde hair. He was holding Steve, who was unconscious. This man... Steve opened his eyes and recognized him. It was Phoenix, his favorite hero. Steve remembered how recently he dreamed of meeting him, looking at his portrait in his room. 100 birds, Phoenix, Steve whispered and passed out again. They were approaching the ground where the numb brothers were still standing. What happened to this idiot? Who the hell is Steve? One of the brothers asked in surprise. Phoenix looked at Luke contemptuously. You understood everything wrong. It was just a joke. He immediately started pretending that he hadn't done anything wrong. How could it be a joke if a soldier used the power of the guardian spirit against an ordinary person? Asked Phoenix. I will cancel your title of warrior of the 2nd degree. You will be punished accordingly, the hero said sternly. Luke couldn't believe it. He spent so much time and effort on training that it meant the end for him. The war hero rose into the sky with his wings spread. A silhouette of fire formed around him. Phoenix's fighting spirit? Luke said doomedly, understanding what this could mean. Drops of fire began to drip from the sky. The action of the Phoenix force. The drops fell on Luke, taking away his fighting spirit. Steve was lying on the ground unconscious while Phoenix was sitting next to him and stroking his pet chick, which was sitting on his shoulder. And he opened his eyes a little and turned his head towards Phoenix. He couldn't believe he was seeing him live. Felix looked at him carefully. Steve's eyes were wide open in surprise, but he had not yet gathered his strength. You woke up, Phoenix asked Steve, smiling. Thanks for your help. If there is something, if there's anything I can do to help. I'll do my best, Steve said gratefully, already on his knees. No, Phoenix reassured him. I didn't know it was you. I'm your fan. I have posters of you all over the room. Steve began to chatter, not believing his eyes. Only 2 hours have passed, and he has fully recovered, the war hero thought, and this pleased him. That one, what's the matter, Steve asked, having calmed down a little. Everything is fine, Phoenix answered calmly, stroking the bird that was sitting on his shoulder. As for the 2 brothers, do not worry about them. One of them seems to have studied at the Eastern Military Academy. He got his punishment, rest assured. I used an energy shield on your mother. She is fast asleep. Don't worry, Phoenix explained. Don't worry, it won't happen again. He stood up, preparing to leave. Do you want to see what happened to the brothers? I can show them to you, asked the war hero. The guys were tied up. They were crying and scared. I don't want to see the faces of these idiots, Steve answered. Steve, do you still hate your father? Phoenix asked unexpectedly. No need to mention him. I can protect my mother myself. He became angry at the mention of his father. He doesn't deserve to be remembered by me or Mom, he said angrily. Steve, I think your father had his reasons. He and I were comrades. I know him. Phoenix wanted Steve to not hate his father. The situation is still a mystery, but I am looking for evidence for your father. I don't care. Actually, I don't care if he's a traitor, said the guy. I remember when Dad left, I didn't quite understand why. People around me and my mother hated us. I didn't understand anything. I just cried. It was not easy for him to talk about it. There was pain and resentment in his voice. Every time I look at my mother's face, I see no hatred on it, only tenderness. There is something I cannot tell you. I just looked at my mother's smile and didn't understand why she was smiling. And I still can't understand. Local children bullied me all the time. He remembered every time he was beaten and called names. He remembered how hurt and offended he was. He wanted so much to make friends and play with them, but it never happened. Later, when I grew up, I found a fighting spirit. Now I could resist. I could fight back and stop them. I could protect myself and my mother. That's all. This is how my childhood passed. It was painful for him to remember this and relive it again. Protect your mother and not remind you of your father. I played alone all the time. He answered confidently. I don't care even if he is a statesman. The guy continued. I hate him as a father, because he never was. Steve, believe me, your father loves you more than anyone in the world. In the future, Phoenix put his palm to his chest, as if making a promise to him. You will see this for yourself. The Phoenix was about to fly away. Steve stood opposite him. He wanted an answer to his question. What do you mean? The guy asked. Sunset Academy, have you heard of it? Ask Steve Phoenix. Steve began to remember what he knew about this academy. He did know some information. A special academy that is not under the jurisdiction of any country. I have heard that the students within it are strong sinners. The goal of the academy is to find the strongest seeker. He told everything he knew about it. Although this is true, it seems to me that it has been greatly exaggerated. I even heard that the dean of the academy, very strong, is enough to take full advantage of a group of super dangerous people. He continued. Sunset Academy is located at the junction of 4 countries. This is where your father studied. Once you enter this academy, the path to others is closed to you forever, said Phoenix. Then you will understand, he continued. I know, Steve exclaimed joyfully. Are you saying that I have a chance to get into it? I have a chance to get out of here! I can study like everyone else, right? He asked with hope in his voice. It's not about the father. I want to change my mother's life, the guy admitted honestly. If so, then you leave tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is the last day of recruitment. Phoenix confirmed the guy's guesses. Tomorrow? But Mom? He didn't think about it. He needs to prepare. Don't worry. I'll explain everything to her. You don't need to worry about that. The war hero reassured him. Understood, Steve answered happily. Tonight I will prepare for tomorrow. Thank you. Steve was already rushing home. You're welcome, Phoenix answered him. I think that no matter who catches Steve's eye, he won't be able to stop him. This is called disobedience and the hope of the eye of God. Phoenix thought about Steve. On the second day, he was already rushing by bus to his destination. I've arrived, Steve rejoiced as he got off the bus. The sun blinded his eyes. The guy covered them with his hand and looked at what was in front of him. Is this exactly the same place? Is Sunset Academy in this hole? In front of Steve, there was only desert and sand. This is the place. And there is an academy? He had been walking forward for some time and he felt sick from the scorching sun and hot sand. Baby, you are very excited. Steve had a bird sitting on his shoulder. This is my friend. Take him with you. His name is Baby, so said Phoenix, giving his pet to Steve. Map given by Phoenix. It seems that it is useless here, the guy said, turning the card in his hands. It's too much here. You can die like this. The desert did not end. Steve has been walking through the desert for 3 hours. He was very hungry and dehydrated. On the way, he met a lizard. Not losing this opportunity, he decided to snack on it and gain a little strength. His strength gradually left him. Since he had no water, his body was exhausted. The guy was angry. I followed the map. There is nothing there. He didn't understand what to do next and where the academy was located. Roast water! I want to die! He groaned with the last of his strength, but suddenly he saw something in front of him. This? What is this? Home? Sunset Academy? He really wanted to believe that this was not a mirage. No, he's too small. I don't think it's a hallucination. He still decided to go to this small house to check what was there. I'll go there! And with the last of his strength, he went to the house. After half an hour of travel, he was already standing in front of a house. Rather an old, collapsed house. Granny was sitting in front of the house. Grandma? This is the desert and you knit here? He asked uncertainly, hoping that this was not a mirage. Do you know where Sunset Academy is? I want to join it, asked Steve. Why are you going there? Grandma asked after a while, putting aside her knitting. You have no idea. I waited too long for this opportunity. Mentor Phoenix himself recommended me there, the guy exclaimed. I have so much to do. Lots of places I want to see. Why don't you go into the house and see if it's there? The academy, Granny suggested, continuing to knit. To the house? Granny, you must be joking, the guy answered uncertainly. This little house, if you know where Sunset Academy is, then... He began to get irritated. Come in and take a look, Granny suggested calmly. Okay, he still agreed to come in and take a look. Is there anyone? The guy entered the house. It was dark here, there was nothing but windows and doors. Empty house? He asked in surprise. Your answer to the question is the best, Steve, Granny said, her glasses glowing from the scorching sun. The guy was surprised that she called him by name. How do you know my name? At that moment, the floor creaked under his feet and shook a little. What is this? Steve lowered his head and looked at his feet. The part of the floor on which Steve was standing began to fall sharply. Having lost his balance, he began to fall while screaming loudly. Granny was still sitting near the house and knitting. She heard Steve's frantic scream, which was coming from somewhere under the house, until he moved away completely. There is light! Am I saved? The guy was approaching the end of the tunnel. No, I'm going to die like that! He was afraid that he might break. Finally, he flew out of the tunnel. There was a glass dome around it. But the guy still fell, followed by his things. He fell with great speed, and when he landed on the ground, he picked up the saw. Little Bird watched him fall. Steve climbed out of the hole he created with his impact on the ground. He looked a little rumpled and confused. Grandma, did you want to kill me? He cried from stress. Come here, everyone. You have passed the first part of the selection. The guy heard someone's voice. We will select those suitable for us in the form of a competition. Let's continue to say someone. Steve saw a crowd of people in front of him, all of them looking in the same direction. The methods of victory are not limited, but due to the hassle of cleaning, killing is prohibited. The guy realized that there should be some kind of fights. Most likely, this was their competition. Lastly, welcome to Sunset Academy. Someone finished speaking. He saw buildings in front of him, an arena, a bell tower. This Sunset Academy? He asked in surprise. At his voice, the people standing nearby turned around. Eh? Some fresh meat? Asked a guy with a red bandage on his head. Is Sunset Academy really that bad with its students? He asked mockingly. Give me the stone fist! I will make him feel the difference between us! The guy with the red bandage turned to his spirit. A stone frame appeared on the guy's hand. Come on, break me completely! A huge man approached the guy with a stone fist from behind. Whatever you say? The guy with the stone fist smiled. The guy hit the guy in the stomach with his stone fist. The blow was strong. Taste my fist, and understand that you cannot defeat me. My fist is destroying organs, the guy said proudly. Even an elephant would die from such a blow. The hands of the man with whom he was fighting reached out to the guy with the stone fist. He squeezed it with his hands, using all his strength. The guy couldn't do anything. The huge man squeezed him with such force that the guy's spine most likely broke. Everyone who watched this began to shout something. Steve was shocked by what he saw. He broke his spine. Giant Hank is renowned for his strength and is also the most powerful candidate. I hope you don't meet such a monster in a dark alley, Steve thought. This is a group of people. What a lot of pressure, the guy thought. Interesting. He already felt that he could become part of this circle. Sunset Academy! This is fun! There were only weaklings in my village, Steve said joyfully. I want to see what you have to say about the mysterious Sunset Academy. There was some kind of plan in your eyes. What exactly is she and what she really is? I will kill everyone in my path. Everyone! This is my last chance, the guy said. Something was happening inside the academy. Some guy fell from the blow, breaking the wall. The guy immediately lost consciousness, leaving a large dent on the wall. I told you that I can't sell anything here, naughty boy, the man in the suit said, looking at the lying guy. You always make me angry, he said, adjusting his glasses. He looked like a vampire with 2 fangs. Someone knocked on his door. Come in. Director, a man in a black suit, entered the office. Mr. Jack? The man with fangs turned to face him and smiled, clearly happy to see him. The exam is about to start. Would you like to watch it? Asked Jack. No, I won't go to this children's exam. I'm too busy, answered the director. I heard that this man's son will also come. He adjusted his glasses again. And the heir also came this year, Jack answered. Wonderful, the director said joyfully. Ladies and gentlemen, the exam is about to begin. In the first stage, the props will be crows. A voice was heard from the loudspeaker throughout the academy. Ugh, crows, props? Steve said dissatisfied. There are hundreds of crows in the college. Your task is to catch a crow carrying a package on its paw, the voice said again. As soon as you remove this package, you must keep it with you, and after the time has passed, those who have the packages left pass. There is no limit to receiving the package. You have 3 hours. There are only 50 crows that have a package on their paw all the time. Even seconds are counted, explained the voice. 50! This means that only 50 people can pass, and here there are at least 1,000. Is the probability of passing so low? Steve was surprised. Why aren't they the least bit surprised? Did they know the rules? Steve looked at the others. There was joy on their faces. It may even be necessary to kill. It didn't scare him. He was ready. The command to start was sounded. The entire crowd prepared to fight among themselves. Team march. Time has passed. Yes, I'm looking forward to this moment, the director said to Jack, watching the competition. You mean? Jack began. These 2 boys. Don't let me down. I want to make friends with you, said the director and licked his teeth. Steve was looking for a crow. He walked through the tunnels, looked into dark places. I've been searching for half an hour already and still not a single crow. The guy was angry. They are so small that they are so hard to find, he said to himself, and decided to look into another abandoned building. Finally, crow! He was delighted. Steve tried to jump to the crow that was sitting on top, but he couldn't reach her. Stop! I'll still catch you! As soon as he almost reached her, the bird flapped its wings and flew away. I can't believe it. Did she just dodge? The bird flew onto the roof, and Steve climbed after it. As soon as he put his hand on the last ledge from the wall, the pipe broke off. The guy flew down. It was quite high, but there was nothing to grab onto. He landed on his haunches. He wasn't going to give up, so he set out to catch the crows again. Crow, I use the power of my guardian spirit to catch you, Steve said decisively. Steve called on his guardian spirit and confidently rushed after the crow. The guy almost reached out to her with his hand, which contained the spirit. Gotcha! At this moment, the giant Hank was also trying to catch the crow. He sped up and was ready to jump. Hank, covering his face with his hand, jumped out the window, breaking it in the process. Steve was flying right in front of him, chasing a crow. Noticing Hank, Steve was a little confused. He didn't expect to see anyone here. Picking up speed, Hank used his power to fly up. He jumped over the roof of the house and still caught the crow. With the crow in his hand, Hank landed on the ground. And from his force, Steve was thrown back a little. The saw rose, and because of this, nothing was visible for several meters. Steve was also nowhere to be seen. Oh, is this for me? Thank you, Hank said over his shoulder towards Steve. I'm lucky, this crow has a package. Hank took the piece of paper from the bird's paw. Thank you again, Hank said, holding a small package between 2 fingers. Fly, little crow. Hank let the bird go free. Behind the pile of garbage and dust, something began to stir. It was impossible to see who it was. Something was approaching Hank at the speed of the wind, scattering debris along the way. Hank turned his head towards the sound. He didn't like it. Hank prepared for a fight. He suspected it was Steve, but wasn't sure. Not so fast, idiot, Steve said to Hank. When did I say that I would give you the package? The guy asked, activating his spirit. Ho, 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 Hank laughed. He was not afraid of threats. I am the giant from the Thai gang, and the big man continued. At least you will die with dignity. Protective effects and the strength of his spirit appeared on Hank's arms from his shoulders to his knuckles. Although I cannot summon the spirit of war, the copper wall will be quite enough, said the giant, clenching his hand into a fist, and his body was covered in flames using the power of his spirit. Steve started running towards Hank using the power of his spirit. He was fast. Running up to the giant, the guy will use force to kick him in the stomach. Hank didn't even blink an eye when Steve's fist touched him. After all, he was covered with copper armor. Tickly, Hank said, laughing. Steve hit again, but it was useless. Hank was impenetrable. When the giant got tired of this, he, using the power of his spirit, struck Steve with his fist. But he was able to put up a shield. From Hank's blow, the guy drove several meters back, throwing up dust and dirt into the air. Damn, I feel pain in my stomach. The blow dealt by the giant was quite strong. You're fast, but that's not enough, Hank told Steve. Like the previous opponent, you are a waste of time, he continued. Then I will teach you a lesson. This place is not for you, baby, Steve answered. Steve tried to attack Hank again, but he in turn hit the ground with his fist, causing the guy to retreat. Steve wasn't going to give up. He was not afraid of the giant, but he knew that he must take revenge if he wanted to be first. "You won't give up, right?" asked the giant. "I'll take the initiative, big guy." Steve used his fighting spirit again and accelerated towards Hank. Having flown closer to him, he kicked. The foot hit Hank right in the jaw, most likely damaging it. "Then you will die," said Hank. "He's already tired of playing. No one will notice how you disappear." He folded his hands together. "Sleeping burns?" The giant said the name of the technique. Steve was tense. He immediately began to look in his head for ways to protect himself. "I will grind you into powder!" Hank shouted and slammed his hands onto the ground with all his might, raising clouds of drink. "So how?" he asked, smiling evilly. "Turned into a saw. I just spent time on it." Not noticing Steve anywhere, Hank decided to leave. "You are really strong." The big man heard Steve's voice somewhere behind him. "You are the second strong opponent I have met." The guy slowly approached Hank. Despite this, there was blood on the guy's hand. "You're a piece," Hank said, clearly not expecting Steve to survive his attack. "I won't die here. I'm going to take you down," said Steve. There were abrasions on his face and a split lip. Somewhere deep in the mountains, along a path between the rocks, two people were walking. "I heard that entry to Sunset Academy is available worldwide," said one of them. "Emperor Leo, we can catch up with him," said a female voice. On the Emperor's shoulder was a hieroglyph written in red. "It seems that this is the beginning of the exam," she continued. "Let's hurry," he said seriously. Steve pulled himself together and was ready to get back together with Hank. He was surrounded by the power of his spirit and stood opposite the giant. "I will beat you so that my own mother will not know," said the guy. "Damn, you're a walking surprise, boy," the giant smiled. "But I spent too much time on you." Steve watched Hank carefully. He expected what would happen next. "Although my fighting spirit will not last long, it is more than enough to finish you off." Hank summoned his spirit. "I will show you my fighting spirit! Stone Beast!" The stone monster stood behind the giant. "Then I can only do one thing," said Steve. "My best." He also called upon his fighting spirit. "You should thank me for allowing you to see my spirit. Damn idiot." Hank used his strength and, baring his teeth aggressively, attacked Steve. What a lot of pressure. The guy covered himself with his hands like a shield, holding back Hank's attacks. The stone beast pressed with all its force on the guy. The guy was still hiding from the pressure. "Strike!" Two martial spirits fought each other. Each of them was powerful and was not going to yield in strength. Steve held on with all his strength. There was blood on his lips. "Are you bleeding? You know this is not good, right?" Hank asked mockingly. Steve activated his fist and put all the strength of his spirit into it. Pointed his fist at Hank. He wanted to end it as quickly as possible. The blow was quite powerful, but for Hank it was nothing. Everything happened quickly. Steve hoped that he could knock out his opponent. The giant only became angrier. There was only a small abrasion at the site of the impact. There was a yellow trail coming from the abrasion, like a flame, and it was healing. "What is this?" asked Hank. "Impact? I thought a mosquito bit me." Hank was ready to attack Steve again. He swung his fist right at the guy's face, but he managed to cover himself with his hands in time and parry the blow. Steve stabbed Hank again. The blow hit the giant's shoulder. Another blow to the other shoulder. Steve used super speed to hit Hank. "You stupid moron, I told you that your blows are like mosquito bites to me. Now I'll show you how to hit," the thug shouted, angry. "Destructive mountain earthquake!" Hank crossed his arms over his chest and then spread them to the sides, throwing Steve away. "So how?" Hank asked and continued to attack the guy. Steve started coughing. His face was covered in cuts and abrasions. The guy pressed his feet into the ground to stay on his feet from Hank's attack. With the last of his strength, he began to slowly make his way forward, through the weight of Hank's fighting spirit. "Do you feel worthless?" Hank mocked the guy again. "If you want to die, then let me fulfill your wish." The giant rushed to run toward Steve. Steve also rushed forward. Their fighting spirits helped them, giving them strength. Steve clenched his hand into a fist, pointing it straight in front of him. The guy approached Hank and punched him straight in the face with all his might. Hank wasn't wondering either, so his fist hit Steve right in the stomach. Steve still could not resist this blow. The guy flew away and landed on his back. The guy lay on the ground in the dirt and mud and showed no signs of life. His eyes were closed. He did not become a winner. "Idiot, are you trying to do anything else with your pathetic attacks?" Hank looked at the guy's immobilized body. "Now my fighting spirit can return. I don't need him anymore." The giant recalled his spirit, feeling victory over Steve. "Do you think you can hurt me if you concentrate your fighting spirit into one blow?" "Fool," Hank said, smiling. "My iron wall is indestructible. Understood?" He was still looking at where Steve was lying in a pile of drink. "Everyone has a weakness. The bigger you are, the more weaknesses you have." Steve's voice came from where Hank was looking. Is this kid dead yet? The giant thought in surprise. Although your body is solid, you still consist of flesh and blood. The guy's silhouette was slightly visible from behind the cloud of drink. This means that you still have some kind of weakness. Steve came out to Hank. He was holding his side with his hand. He was wounded. Shut up! What can a little nobody like you do to me? Do you think you can destroy me with one blow? Hank was furious. He thought he killed this guy. Have you ever been stung by a bee? Steve asked, and revenge flashed in his eyes. Bee? What are you talking about? The giant was a little at a loss. When a bee stings after a while, the pain intensifies as the venom penetrates the skin, and the area around the puncture swells. Steve explained. I have already stung you several times in the most vulnerable places on your body. Neck, shoulder, armpit, face. The guy expected the giant's reaction. If the injected spirit escapes in one instant, your body will suffer greatly. Steve told Hank the truth. It's time to draw it out of you. The guy pointed to his hand, which should have contained his fighting spirit. Wait a minute! Hank screamed, realizing what awaited him now. Edge of pain, said Steve, and called his fighting spirit, imprisoned in Hank's body. Steve's fighting spirit escaped from his body and returned to its owner. How can this be? Hank only had time to think. His eyes widened in pain. Hank fell. Steve looked at the immobilized body. He was finally a winner. I said this at the very beginning. No need to thank me, Steve said, smiling. I'll take the package. Thank you, big guy, the guy said as he left. The Emperor and the girl stood above the waterfall. The view was beautiful. The blue water and blue sky had a beautiful view. Master Leo, the entrance is behind the waterfall. How do we get inside? Asked the girl. Young master, are you late? She was worried. I said, Lily. Leo made some movements with his index finger in the air, stopping the waterfall. You talk too much. He finished, turning to the girl. A concrete building appeared in front of them. Don't move! He brought his palm to her head, and with the help of force, he placed the girl in a large ball. I'm flying. The girl was flying inside a large ball. Let's go! We're already at Sunset Academy! Leo walked on the water, and the girl flew over the water in a ball. Hank sat and remembered what happened. A crow landed on his shoulder. He remembered the fight with Steve. My head. This kid. I didn't expect him to have an ace up his sleeve. He grabbed his head. This is strange because he seemed weaker than the others, thought Hank. Someone sitting on the roof of the house was looking at Hank. This bird shit on your face, said the guy sitting on the roof. He was a young guy with long black hair. He smiled. He had a fighting spirit. Silhouette in a mask. Red eyes. The spirit had 6 blades behind its back. Fred? Real? Why is it in the assessment area? Hank saw him on the roof and was pleasantly surprised. I saw you fight with this kid. It had to be screwed up like that. Fred turned to Hank, using his fighting spirit to descend from the roof. You. How can I help you? Asked Hank. This guy, I feel his power. Hank whispered to himself. This is a feeling. We have a huge difference in level, Fred answered. This boy is very interesting because he injects his fighting spirit energy into weak spots in the body and then pulls it out. He continued. I can't wait to play with him, said Fred. Hank lowered his head offended. He saw that Fred was ignoring him. Oh yes, what were you saying about your iron wall? He finally turned to Hank. No, I wouldn't dare. It's just an attribute of the spirit, the giant began to explain. Morale with a high defense attribute. Let's watch, Hank suggested happily. What? Something flew into Hank's head. Iron wall, it's fun. Fred killed Hank without even blinking an eye. In the office of the director of the academy, Mr. Jack stood near the door and was told something over the headphones. The director was going to drink tea. Accepted, Jack finally said into the microphone. Director, Fred's spirit has been spotted in the assessment area, Jack reported. The director listened to him carefully. Well, this happens almost every time. In a sense, this is also an assessment, right? He answered calmly. This time, the candidate was killed, and from an assessment point of view, Jack began, this must be one of the Class A wanted criminals. The director, who at that time took a sip of tea, spat it out on the floor. And the class? Asked the director. Criminals are usually divided into Class C, Class B, Class A, and there is the extremely rare Class S. Class A is a group of people who have killed a lot of people, and the state defines them as an extremely vicious group. I cannot be sure of all the assessees we accept, the director, and put a cup of tea on the table. Let's go! I don't want to be blamed by that old dean. They left the office. In the evaluation area, they said that there are only 30 minutes left before the end of the competition. You need to hurry up. Steve came across another player with whom he fought in the corridor. I wish you to win. Steve attacked and the guy defended. Each of them wanted to win. This child, such an oppressive spiritual attack. What kind of monster is this? Thought one of the players, defending himself from Steve's attack.
Just don't get distracted. Steve used his super speed power.
The guy punched his opponent in the stomach with all his strength. The opponent backed away from the blow. Being distracted is dangerous, said the verse, realizing that victory was almost in his hands. It's over, said Steve's opponent. His eyes widened from the force of the blow. He couldn't say anything more. Steve watched his opponent fall. Fourth, Steve said near his opponent, who was lying unconscious at his feet. The closer the end of time gets, the more people try to attack me to get a pass. This is really annoying, said the guy. We need to end this. It's so tiring. He was still looking at his opponent, who showed no signs of life. In any case. And what my father said came back to my memory. Steve remembered some moments from his childhood. Little Steve, directing the spirit to the body has different effects, his father once told him. I didn't expect to survive this time, but my dad's words inspired me a lot. The guy continued. I don't know how to compare him to Phoenix, but he was a member of the murder organization. The image of his idol appeared in his head. No, Phoenix must be the strongest. My idol. A dreamy smile immediately appeared on his face. Wonderful trick, not bad at all. Someone behind the guy clapped his hands. Steve immediately turned his head towards the voice, and the question immediately arose in my head with whom he would fight this time. I'm really starting to like you. Fred stood opposite Steve. I've been looking for you for so long, little boy. Fred turned to Steve. Did you come here to pick up my pass too? Steve asked Fred angrily. What's going on here? This man is completely different from others, Steve thought, watching Fred. Did you say pass? No, this thing doesn't interest me, Fred answered. I'm more interested in taking you apart, he answered honestly. What the hell? Stop talking nonsense. If you want to fight, just come over. Steve took a defensive position, expecting an attack. Use the power of time to understand, then it should not be a problem, Steve thought. Wow, what a mean little boy. Fred smiled strangely. Bang! He fired with 2 fingers as if with a pistol, but something flew out of his hand towards Steve. It flew past Steve's face, slightly grazing his cheek. Blood immediately appeared at that place. Steve couldn't figure out what it was. What? This? Is this spiritual energy? He asked, and touched the cut on his cheek with his fingers. To the point, I smell blood, Fred answered, watching the guy. Only this smell can intoxicate me. Energy formed around Fred. He closed his eyes, enjoying it. I apologize in advance for the pleasure of picking you apart. Fred formed a blade in his hand from the same energy that was around him. But at least I'll have a little respect for you when I do it. A blade also formed in Fred's second hand. Nice to meet you. My name is Fred, he said, and crossed the blades among themselves. I am your killer. His face became more serious. He connected the 2 blades, and they became a sword. Spiritual sword? Steve thought in horror. I can't let him take the initiative. Steve called on his fighting spirit. First cover the entire body with spirit. He began to make a defense. Concentrate while he moves, I will find his weak point. Steve thought. It sounds like you're just using spirituality, which isn't interesting enough, said Fred. Let me show you how it works. He pointed his sword with his fighting spirit hand directly at Steve. The spirit sword flew the distance and pierced Steve in the stomach. An attack of this level cannot be avoided, Fred warned. Steve held his stomach. This won't work, baby, Fred continued. It hurts, the guy thought. He was covered in abrasions and cuts. My abdominal cavity was punctured. Blood dripped from the wound. His body was shaking. Oh my God, it's a shame, but I don't know how much it hurts. But I do not care, Fred said while watching Steve. I thought you already knew something about spiritual power. But it seems I was wrong. It seems that you don't even know the side of the spirit yet, or even the meaning of the spirit. Your method of attack is simply to direct spiritual force into one part of the body or another. Spiritual direction in different parts of the body has different effects, but this is the basis that everyone knows about, Fred continued. The advanced use spirit and mind to integrate into the desired form, he explained. And this is already a specification. He made a movement with his hand directing spiritual power. That attack again, Steve thought. Spiritual power was directed towards him, but Steve managed to dodge to the side, avoiding being hit. Oh, this time you managed to come back, said Fred. But he made a movement with his finger, calling on the spiritual force to return back. The spiritual power in the form of an arrow returned, passing through Steve's shoulder. The guy fell to his knees. He held on with all his strength. I have no more strength left, he thought. He understood that he could lose this fight. When you have a deeper understanding of spiritual power, you can control its direction at will, said Fred. That man, he began. He clenched the sword in his hand, getting ready to attack Steve again. Your father, Roger, didn't he teach you anything? Steve heard his father's name and became a little furious. Dance of glory, Fred said, and used his spiritual attack again. From the blow of the spirit, a huge wave was formed, and Steve was thrown back. Even here, there's no escaping Dad's reputation, the guy thought as he fell. Leo, who was already at the academy, was surprised. This is such a strong spiritual attack, he thought. Lily, let's go. He called the girl, who was near the guy lying on the ground and was looking for something in his pockets. Oh, found! She took the pass out of her pocket. Now we have more than 20 passes. The girl was happy. 2 are enough. Throw away the rest, Leo ordered. Okay, master, she answered disappointedly. In one of the alleys of the college streets, there was too much spiritual energy. That's where they are, said the assistant director, Jack. Such strong spiritual energy is easy to find. It seems that the other party is not afraid of college, said the director, adjusting his glasses. So, this troublesome guy, when he came back? Asked the director while watching Fred. Damn it, I know he's going to give us trouble, he continued. Who is he fighting with? It's rare to see him serious. The director took a closer look. Oh, it's Steve. He was finally able to see the guy lying on the ground. I'll go downstairs and pick up Steve, Jack suggested. No. The school director stopped him. Calm down. Let's see what happens next. These two have finally met. Show me what you can do, son of Roger, the director said with interest. I'm really sorry, but I got a little carried away. Fred stood next to Siva, who still could not get up. But as soon as I mentioned your father's name, I couldn't contain my emotions, Steve, said Fred. I thought you knew a couple of your father's tricks. Didn't he teach you? He asked. In the end, were my efforts in vain? Steve thought upon hearing Fred's words. That's right. You didn't understand anything about the difference in strength because I used too weak an attack, Fred said, smiling. Come on out, Fred called on his combat attribute. Standing next to him was a spirit in black, with 6 daggers behind his back, who first appeared in the fight with Hank. Now let's talk seriously, Fred continued. I trained a lot. So why? Steve thought. Why can't you let me move forward a little? Director, aren't you in the way? Jack asked, watching all this. He just watched silently. He still could not understand what to do next. Fred sent down a shower of spiritual power. The shower was like lightning, pointing 2 fingers in Steve's direction, guiding them. All the lightning immediately rushed towards Steve. Fred turned to Steve, watching. You disappointed me a little, Steve, Fred continued, seeing how lightning pierced the guy's body. Hey, you two, how long are you planning on watching? Fred raised his head and shouted somewhere upward, addressing the director and Jack. You are also interested in this child, right? He asked them. Fred, aren't you afraid that the dead will blame you for all this? Asked the director, looking down at Fred. Don't say that, I'm just helping you get rid of garbage, he answered. And you should at least indicate an opinion of some respect after all. I am a graduate of Luoga College, he continued. My chest is so cloudy, I shouldn't have done this. Come here, this is my last chance. I do not like it. Steve's head was cloudy. Mom, it's useless. We cannot change our destiny. An image of his mother appeared in his head. I hate them. I hate everything in the world that makes me unhappy. I hate this world if that's possible, thought the guy, pouring out all his anger inside himself. He began to rise. Several fragments were still in his body. He stood up. His anger helped him gain new strength that he did not have before and could not use. The conversation between the director and Fred continued. Then you are ready to go against the dean, the director said to Fred. At that moment, Fred and John felt something. They still couldn't understand what was going on, but their attention was directed towards where Steve was. Leo also noticed that something was happening. Lily ran up to him. She stopped abruptly when she pressed her nose against his leg. "Aw," she sobbed, hitting herself. "Master Leo, Bobo, spout!" She pointed to her bruised nose. "This smell?" He focused on the new energy, not paying attention to Lily. Steve finished his transformation. His fighting spirit was a real monster. Black silhouette, white eyes. There was a lot of dark energy around him. "If it's possible," he growled in a voice that was not his own. "I will kill them all!" Horns appeared on the head of his spirit, and long claws appeared on his hands. He destroyed everything in his path. Steve stood still, surrounded by the red and black power of his fighting spirit. "Ha ha ha, Steve, you still didn't let me down." Fred laughed joyfully, watching Steve's strength. "What kind of fighting spirit is this?" the director asked with admiration. "He's like a demon from the underworld." He saw a guy in front of him who had almost merged with his fighting spirit. "Yes, Steve, this is what I wanted from you. This is Roger's son." Fred was still happy. "Don't you dare!" Steve slowly turned his head towards Fred, sparks dancing in his eyes. "Mention him," he finished. His fighting spirit extended his hand to Fred, following Steve's order. He made the tackle. "Dodge!" the director shouted, noticing Steve's spirit approaching them. The hand of the fighting spirit tore the floor of the wall near the director to pieces. "It was close. What a terrible spiritual attack," said Jack. "It looks like Fred will cause us even more problems," said the director. At the moment when Steve smashed the wall, Fred was thrown back by the wave and he summoned his fighting spirit. "What a furious attack! Completely different from his previous ones," Fred exclaimed. This clearly brought him pleasure. Steve was hunting Fred. He saw how he dodged his spirit. He again ordered the fighting spirit to attack Fred. He wanted to take revenge on him. This time, Steve's fighting spirit's hand hit Fred's face directly, causing it to change its shape slightly. Taking advantage of the moment and the fact that Fred was in clouds of dust, he prepared to attack Steve. "Steve, you hurt me!" Fred laughed, his Zanpakuto already in his hand. "Dance of glory," Fred said and lunged forward with his sword, forming a wave of combat power. Steve used the block at this time. His martial spirit touched the wave from the Zanpakuto with his finger. Steve and Fred stood opposite each other with their fighting spirits. A circle formed around them from their combat energy. Fred raised his head to look. He was in awe of Steve's fighting spirit. The monster's finger was still slightly touching the sword, but this caused cracks to appear on the spiritual sword. "I can't believe it. Did he stop Fred's attack with one finger?" said the director, who had been watching the fight all this time. "Also, if you look closely, Steve appears to be unconscious," Jack added. "Fred's intense intent to kill seems to be the reason that keeps him going," the director thought. Looking at Steve, he realized something. "I understood the reason why he became like this. This is hatred," he finally said, realizing this. "Steve, that's not enough. Can you turn me on even more?" Fred asked, standing opposite Steve. "I am very interested in your fighting spirit," he continued. "I wonder if your father will be proud of you." He went on a provocation to make Steve even more furious. "You!" Energy came out of Steve's eyes and mouth, which connected him with his fighting spirit. His spirit gathered some red energy into his palm. "I will kill you to shut you up," Steve answered furiously. "What is this terrifying energy?" Director Fred and Jack were horrified, feeling the evil emanating from Steve. The streets were shrouded in fog. The sky above the academy became overcast. Leo watched everything happening from around the corner of one of the publications. "Why does this smell bother me so much?" He couldn't understand. "He makes me anxious and afraid at the same time," Leo thought. "Young master, are you all right?" Lily asked, approaching Leo. "Yes, I'm fine," Leo answered. "It is rare to see a gentleman in such a mood." Lily became worried. Steve and his fighting spirit were ready to take Fred down. "I'll kill you," Steve said confidently. He threw a ball of dark energy at Fred. "Come on, Steve, show me more blood!" Fred egged him on. Extreme Dragon Dance. Fred used another technique. "Is Fred finally getting serious again? I really like this." The director was happy, watching Fred. Fred and Steve's fighting spirit clashed with each other again. Something landed on the roof of one of the buildings, causing the building to shake slightly. "I won't allow it." It was the granny who helped Steve in the desert so that he could get into the academy. The director immediately recognized her voice and turned his head in her direction. Granny used her fighting spirit and immediately scattered everyone around, also setting up a fight between Fred and Steve. "Deputy Dean?" Jack asked himself. "Grandma Rose?" The director, when he saw her, almost slid to the floor and grabbed his head with his hands from fear. This person. Steve couldn't remember where he saw her, but she was familiar to him. "Isn't this the same grandmother? Who was sitting in front of that house?" The guy finally remembered. "Ha!" That was all Fred could say. He could barely stand on his feet due to the strength of his grandmother's fighting spirit. "She stopped both my attack and Steve's attack with one movement." This made him a little angry. This granny was the vice dean of the college, the gatekeeper of Sunset College, Buddha Rose. Steve and his spirit flew away from the granny's blow. The guy crashed into a building. Several stones fell on him. He fell somewhere between the houses. Grandmother stood and calmly watched the superior. The director and Jack covered themselves with their hands from the fragments and stones that were everywhere. Leo only closed one eye. Lily could barely stay on her feet. "How interesting!" Old Rose, if I hadn't come here to start a fight, I wouldn't have seen your abilities. Fred was delighted with what he saw. You two are coming down. Granny turned to the director and Jack, who were still on the roof of the building. Granny, Deputy Dean. The director bowed in front of her. Hello, Deputy. Jack also bowed. Without saying a word, Rose hit Jack right in the nose. The director was next. He also received a fist in the face. Do you want them to destroy the college? You are idiots! Did you have a good time? Ah! She was furious. Don't you understand that Steve can't control his power yet? Or that he is actually being manipulated? Granny interrogated the director. He doesn't even know what's happening. This kind of uncontrollable power hurts him the most. She was still screaming. Besides, you actually indulged this uncontrollable force that was driving him crazy. What? Do you need hot tea and melon seeds for a better viewing experience? She stood opposite the director and Jack with her hands on her chest. They fell to the ground out of fear. We just wanted to know what Steve's strength is. The director began to deny, smiling and pretending to be innocent. Shut up! This is complete nonsense! How can we trust you and leave the college in your hands? What should I tell the dean? Grandma hit the director in the face again. Jack closed his eyes tightly at this time, hoping that she wouldn't catch him. The spirit of the deputy dean is still as good as before. I came to see you. Fred turned to Rose. He smiled sweetly at her when she turned to face him. Rose looked at him carefully. She didn't know if she wanted to kill him or cripple him. As soon as I'm done with the mess, I'll be back. Your smile is still infuriating, Fred, she finally said, and moved on. Don't get me wrong, I just know he's Roger's son, so I wanted to see his fighting spirit, the guy said, wiping his face from the blood. You really haven't changed at all, and it's all because of your wrong thinking. Because Roger chose Phoenix over you, Fred, she said, remaining standing with her back to him. Fred froze. Most likely he was remembering something from the past that Rose had talked about. It turned out that the rumor was true. There were rumors that Phoenix and Fred were once students of Steve's father, thought the director upon hearing this conversation. These two army dogs? I forgot about them a long time ago, said Fred. It sounds like you weren't very comfortable fighting against Steve. Why even deceive yourself? Asked Rose. It's true. That's why I hate talking to smart people. He smiled at Grandma. She looked at him and thought about something, but did not speak. You two. She turned to the director and Jack. They immediately fell to their knees in front of her. Teacher Jack, Steve should be unconscious right now. Quickly take him to the medical office. She turned to him in a commanding tone. Yes, sir! Jack saluted her and rushed to find Steve. Director, the assessment is over. Make a list of this year's applicants. She turned to the director. I almost forgot, I'm such an idiot. He answered her, stuttering. Do you still dare to act nice? She hit him again. Let's remember, Jack thought and even stopped breathing. About Steve's fighting spirit, Fred began, turning to Rose. He can't control this power, right? I felt especially strange when I fought him, Fred said, choosing his words. I don't know exactly, but his fighting spirit seemed to come out of nowhere. He finished, remembering their skirmish. He is like a separate life. Steve had no control over his fighting spirit. It's none of your business, Fred, Rose warned him. But let's say this if Steve is not Roger's son, or if he had the spirit you talk about. Rose fell silent, thinking about something. Steve must be here somewhere. Jack continued to look for the guy. Found it. Jack saw Steve in front of him, who was standing unconscious under the wall. Looking closer, Jack saw dents on the wall from Steve's fighting spirit. Then, I will kill him immediately, Rose finally said after thinking it over. The assessment of candidates took place in complete silence. Those who failed quietly left, and those who passed were told to be quiet. The losers were desperate. The winner was unhappy. This is Luogi College. In the medical building, in one of the hospital wards, Steve came to his senses. The guy tried to get out of bed but felt a sharp pain. It hurts. He grimaced painfully in pain. You're fine. Nothing serious. Rose was sitting in a chair next to his bed. Oh, are you the grandmother at the house? He asked her, not quite understanding what she was doing here. I'm Rose, Deputy Dean of Luogi College. Please don't call me Grandma, she answered calmly, sipping her tea. Injuries on your body are not such a big problem. It will hurt a little, but it's okay. You can get out of bed and move, she reassured him. I have had this feeling since childhood. Whenever I was in pain, I felt healed after sleeping. His wounds really began to heal. Did the Phoenix send you here? Rose asked. Yes! Phoenix said this is my only chance. I won't let him down, Steve answered confidently. Stop, Rose ordered him. Steve sighed heavily. Phoenix, what were you thinking? Rose asked herself, puzzled. It was already evening, it was dark outside, the moon was shining in the sky. Rose and Steve were still talking in the hospital room. What? Is Phoenix also a student at Luoga College? Steve couldn't believe it. Yes, Phoenix is still your father's student. The one who fought you, Fred, was also your father's student, Rose said. Wait, let me just think about this. Steve's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe it. Therefore, it took him some time to comprehend everything. There's something else you don't know, Steve, Rose said, heading towards the exit. And also, you passed the exam. The woman stopped at the door. Thank you. That's all he could say. He no longer understood whether he needed this victory or not. Your questions can wait until tomorrow, baby, Rose said and left, leaving Steve alone with his thoughts. The morning rays of the sun made their way through the window. Steve squinted his eyes a little as he woke up in the morning. Good morning, Steve heard a familiar voice in his sleep. Kind, he answered, not yet fully recovered from sleep. He turned his head towards the voice to see who it was. He was immediately seized by wild horror when he saw who was sitting in front of him. What the heck? He shouted when he saw Fred in front of him. You, Fred, what do you want? He shouted in rage. Don't worry, you slept so well that I didn't have the courage to wake you up, Fred answered, smiling at Steve. From today I will be your instructor. Let's have fun together, Steve, Fred said, still smiling. Appoint Fred as his instructor? Are you seriously? You smile, but aren't you worried? After all, he is a wanted Class A criminal. The director was indignant to Rose in her office. What's wrong with Class A? She asked calmly, diligently writing something down in her notebook. Half of us here are the same as him. Don't look down on Fred. His strength was equal to that of the Phoenix at that time, and Roger chose him first. She continued, still writing something down. You just don't like Fred, she suggested. Who can compare with the power of the Phoenix? The director was indignant. Let him try. After all, Fred is Roger's student too. I don't know what they will achieve together, but I'm looking forward to it, Rose said. Just don't create problems, Fred. Rose remembered the day before their conversation with Fred. Instructor? Then I also have one condition, Fred asked her. I want to be alone with Steve, he said. I don't know what he's up to, but Fred is Steve's best choice as an instructor, she thought to herself. What are you writing down there? Asked Principal Rose. Hey, have you forgotten? He comes once every 3 years. The college tournament starts in 3 weeks, she answered. I am recording the tournament participants, she said to the director. Some symbols were drawn on the sheet of her notebook. All participants gathered in the building of the Supreme Council. There were several people in the meeting room. They were talking about something. Then, on behalf of the government, I address you, Mr. Phoenix, who has the highest level of fighting spirit, 100 birds, said the state councilor and right-hand man, Sam. Could you please explain why you helped Steve, the son of a traitor, escape from government surveillance and sent him to college? He turned to Phoenix, who was sitting opposite him. Next to Phoenix sat one of the 5 heroes, a girl with white hair. The first of the 5 heroes was Phoenix. His fighting spirit is 100 birds. I said, why should I explain this to you? Phoenix bowed his head in boredom. What? Sam asked. I feel like I have the power and I can do this, right? Phoenix answered calmly. I'm so sorry. Although, Mr. Phoenix, you have the highest rank in our country and you are the first of the 5 heroes, you are also a member of the assassination organization. And the organization of murder is under state control. The advisor, without holding back his emotions, began to raise his voice. This means that as long as you are a member of the murder organization, you are obliged to report your actions to us. Rules are rules. Sam hit the table with his hand. Aren't you cute? Phoenix asked, smiling while watching Sam. We can't let Steve's family go and let them do whatever they want, said Sam. If you had not intervened, they would all have disappeared by now. You have become too soft-hearted, the advisor continued. Phoenix lost his temper a little from such words. He was not ready to tolerate such treatment. Having released several pieces of feathers, Phoenix threw them straight at the advisor. They flew near his face and crashed into the wall near his head. How dare you raise your voice in my presence? The Phoenix was already standing near the advisor's chair. One of the razor-sharp feathers on its wing was pointed at Sam's throat. Frightened, Sam could not even move. Suddenly, someone's hand appeared before Sam's eyes. Someone took him by the head with all his might and slammed his face into the table. Phoenix looked this man straight in the eye, but he didn't say anything. I apologize for the rude behavior of my subordinates, Mr. Phoenix, the man said, holding Sam's head pressed against the table. He left Sam and straightened his jacket, while taking a handkerchief from his pocket. "I hope that this will not affect the real purpose of this meeting, the infiltration project, Mr. Phoenix," asked the man who turned out to be the Supreme State Counselor of the Lee country. "I understand that it is not my responsibility to select new and good spies," Phoenix answered. "Is this so? As one of the 5 heroes who protect the country, don't you use your power for the good of the country?" asked High Counselor Thomas. "As you know, after the incident with Roger, the murder practically fell apart and it was decided to create 5 heroes defenders," the girl next to Phoenix answered, crossing her arms over her chest. "Then we'll finish here," Thomas answered. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Let's go, Sarah." Phoenix and the girl headed towards the exit from the meeting room. She immediately found herself near him, using her strength without wasting energy on physical movement. They walked for some time in complete silence, each thinking about something of his own. Thomas watched them. His face expressed complete seriousness and concentration. "This Phoenix is more arrogant than I thought," Thomas finally said. "Okay, you can stop now." He turned to Sam, who continued to lie on the table. "This is painful. Don't you know how strong you are?" Sam raised his head and asked offendedly. "Anyway, let's make these great war heroes have some fun for a while." A suspicious smile appeared on Thomas's face. "Well, I hope you don't regret this, Phoenix." Thomas clearly came up with something. Phoenix stood on the balcony of one of the floors. He looked somewhere into the distance and thought about something of his own. "Phoenix!" Sarah turned to him. He turned his head in her direction. "Sorry for bothering you." She came closer to him. "You don't bother me at all." He smiled at her. The girl smiled back at him. "Government's becoming more and more intriguing," she started the conversation. "It is better than the relations of some government officials," he answered in a serious tone. "The stronger they become, the same day, so..." He thought about something again. The council members led by Thomas, they don't know how much support he has and his selfish desires that no one knows about. It's not easy. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Phoenix raised his head up, addressing someone. "Oh, I remember him." The girl also raised her head up. "Long time no see, baby." Phoenix extended his hand, and the bird he had offered to Steve flew up to him. During this time, Steve and Fred tried to make some friends. "Where are we?" Steve asked, when they approached some destroyed building. "Why did we come to this place? I have to find my bird." Steve didn't let up. "We must meet with the others," Fred answered calmly. "You guys," someone's voice was heard in the darkness. Steve tensed a little. He didn't know what would happen next. "We were late." Leo stood with Lily waiting for the others. "Who are you anyway?" Steve asked, folding his arms over his chest. Leo looked closely at Steve, remembering his fighting spirit and battle. Leo was still thinking about the terrible fighting spirit and how Steve controlled it. "Hey, your fighting spirit." But Leo was not allowed to finish, interrupting him. "Sorry to interrupt. Fred said so that everyone would pay attention to him, but I still have a lot to do and I don't have much time," he continued. "Therefore, shut your mouths." He was a little out of his mind. Everyone present turned their attention to Fred. "Thank you. I will introduce myself." His mood improved a little. "My name is Fred, and I have been appointed by the Associate Dean to be your instructor for the next 3 years. As a teacher, I have one small rule," said Fred. "I demand absolute obedience." If not, a sly smile appeared on his face. "As an instructor, I have the right to throw you out of Luogi College," he finished. "You tried to kill me? How can I trust you?" Steve shouted, furious. Well, there was no malicious intent here. "I just wanted to see what you can do. No need to get angry." Fred walked up to Steve and patted him on the head. "What's the catch? Don't students teach themselves in college?" Leo asked in surprise. "No catch. I was asked to," Fred answered calmly. Phoenix listened to what his bird told him, which was with Steve all this time, and saw what was happening to him. "What is it?" Sarah asked, watching Phoenix's expression change when he heard something from the bird. "Nothing," he answered, clearly not intending to tell her the truth. "Minor incidents, but it seems Steve ended up at Luoga College. Thanks for the hard work, kid." He turned to the bird. "As you expected," said the girl. "Phoenix, he's still looking for clues about the Roger incident," Sarah thought. "However, there seems to be something unusual about Steve," Phoenix said, looking into the distance. "Unusual?" Sarah asked. "Sarah, we're heading to college," said Phoenix, and they went to their destination. "Now, your first task." Fred turned to Steve, who was perplexed. "Seriously? We haven't even had lessons yet. How about the opening ceremony?" asked Steve. "Opening ceremony? Steve, you are so naive and sweet." Fred laughed. "Ignorant," Leo added. "There are no such tedious things at Luoga College," Fred explained. "And the so-called teachers do not teach from the word at all," he summed up. "All knowledge is based on what you take away from missions," said Fred. It's just a huge madhouse called college, Steve thought. This is what Luogi College is all about, said Fred. Steve saw a view of a large number of towers and houses. I didn't even know, Steve began, being a little in a stupor. He is completely different, said Fred. College 3 zones. The zone we are in now is safe. In addition, there is also a starting and intermediate zone, but there is also a military hero zone. All types of battles are prohibited in the safe area where the deputy dean and teachers are located, the guy explained. There is a saying about the safe zone, and death is a gift from heaven, and each region has its own laws. The initial and intermediate zones are nominally non-aggressive and are separated by a wall. Fred continued to tell. Yes, what zone does the young master live in? Lily asked, meaning Steve. I have to clean up. Everyone immediately paid attention to the girl, but remained silent. You all live in the zone of military heroes. Fred spread his arms to the sides, smiling happily. This is the place for your first mission. He turned again to Leo and Steve. I will say just once. Listen. All attention was focused on him. In the War Heroes zone, there are 3 main factions and 4 small groups. He began to explain the task. One of the small groups is called 3A. It is rumored to be the weakest, so... Before he could finish speaking, Steve interrupted him. Do you want us with them? Did you find out everything? Is this our mission? He asked. No, the mission is not this, but to sweep them out of here. For 2 weeks, said Fred. How is this possible? In 2 weeks? Does he want us to defeat the war heroes? I'm not even a military hero. Steve was indignant, leaving the building with Lily. Even so, they left this girl alone. Why are they even chatting there? Big brother, Lily said, turning to Steve, looking at some kind of map. If the young master were here, I would not need anything else. Here we go. She indicated the direction with her hand. This man, is he strong? Steve asked about Leo. Yes, very strong. The young master is the coolest. The girl began to praise him. When I have no choice but to become stronger, he answered. Well, the young master also wants to become stronger. Let's all try together, Lily suggested. From our apartment, we need to turn right. The girl continued to look at the map. Lily and Steve went out to one of the buildings that was marked on the map. Was it a cat? Steve asked, hearing some rustling. Kitty, let's watch! Lily exclaimed joyfully. Kitty, Kitty, the girl called the animal. So how? Steve asked her when she looked around the corner. Oh, that's not a cat. They saw an unconscious girl in the corner. She had scratches on her body. Leo stood on the balcony and watched the evening college. The lights were on in the windows. The sky was starry. I know why you are here, Leo. Fred approached him. It's hard to miss a member of the Jai family, one of the largest families. He started the conversation. Why don't we skip the formalities and get down to the main thing? Leo asked. The reason why the Jai family has become one of the 3 largest families is because of its unique fighting spirit and god of despair. Fred answered. The only spirit that could be inherited. It can only be inherited through the humble ties of the Jai family. Previously, there were only 6 generations. Fred explained to Leo his origins. You are one of the 7th generation, Fred continued. You are desperately trying to become stronger in order to become the heir and get ahead of the 2 brothers. They stood with their backs to each other. Only the strongest are worthy to inherit. Aren't these your principles? Fred asked, turning his head slightly towards Leo.
What are you trying to say? Leo asked, also turning slightly towards Fred.
I can make you stronger for a while, but there is one condition, Fred said, smiling. Condition? Leo asked, turning to Fred. Defeat Steve, Fred answered. Steve, are you strong? Leo asked, again looking at the view from the balcony. Brother Steve, in this room! Here, Lily chattered, indicating the direction. Steve kicked the door down. You came back first, Steve said when he saw Leo in front of him. Lying on Steve's shoulder was the unconscious girl he'd found with Lily. I had no idea that you had such a hobby, Leo said, seeing the whole picture in front of him. Let's put her on the sofa. What do you mean, Leo? Steve asked, throwing the girl onto the sofa. We found the older sister halfway here, and she was already unconscious, Lily explained to Leo. What could this mean? Took many blows all over the body. They all stood and watched the girl. I think she got into a fight. What a pity. And Steve decided to carry her. The girl was still unconscious. You brought her here. I don't even know who she is. What recklessness, Leo answered. I don't care. She could have died. That's why I saved her. I'm so tired. Steve rubbed the shoulder on which he carried the girl. Leo watched silently. He was thinking about something. I'm going to heal my big sister. Lily approached the girl, putting her hands forward. Lily, do you know how to cure her? Steve asked doubtfully. Yes, Our spiritual family is my Jai family. We have been providing medical support in the family for many generations, and this is an absolute honor for me," the girl answered. She shone like a candle. Lily was doing something near the unconscious girl. A bright light was emanating from her. Leo and Steve watched from afar. "Honestly, is she trying to brainwash her or something?" asked Steve. "No, I don't think so," Leo replied. "Oh, great and powerful young master of the Jai family," Steele began to grimace. "Boredom," Leo answered this. Lily diligently continued to heal the girl. The bruises and cuts began to disappear. Finally, the girl opened one eye, gradually coming to her senses. "Oh, you woke up!" Steve exclaimed joyfully when he saw her open her eyes. The girl turned her head towards Leo and Steve. "Little sister, are you okay?" Lily asked, carefully examining the girl. Suddenly, claws appeared on the girl's hand, and she swung at Lily standing next to her. "Hey, what it is?" Steve asked in fear when he saw this. The girl's hand approached Lily, and she couldn't even move out of fear. "Stop!" Leo grabbed her hand, not allowing her to harm Lily. His eyes began to glow, holding the girl. She didn't know what to answer. She just looked Leo in the eyes, but she had already calmed down a little. "We found you unconscious and even wounded, and all the wounds on your body were cured by her. So calm down," Steve said, hiding the frightened Lily behind him. Little sister, are you feeling better yet?" Lily asked, sobbing. "Yes," the girl answered. She was still in great shock. Leo was still holding her back. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud sound. One of the walls collapsed, filling the room with stones and dust. "What is this?" Steve asked, covering himself with his hand from the fragments. "It's all over," said the girl they found. Some creatures began to enter the room. They were creepy. Smoke came out of their mouths. Leo, Steve, and the girl froze in place, watching the monsters. "You are so predictable," one of the monsters said, pointing his finger at the girl. He was tall, had long gray hair on his head, and his eyes glowed. "Third Master, calm down. After we take her back, the boss will reward us," said the second monster, all green with a long tongue and big red eyes. "In this zone, no one can escape from 3A, said the first monster. Steve and Leo tensed up a little. "Are you 3A? They asked in one voice. They remembered that just recently Fred ordered them to destroy 3A. This was their first task. "Underpants!" shouted the girl with the claws. "Rebecca!" She escaped Leo's grasp and jumped back. Rebecca jumped and did a flip in the air. There was a bright glow around her as she used her power. Somersaulting in the air, Rebecca landed on all fours. "You guys!" She gathered her strength, not wanting to give up. "Let my sister go! I won't let you leave with her!" She stood up proudly, intending to fight the monsters. "Sister?" Steve asked, turning his head in her direction. "Our boss thinks you are blessed. It is a pity that our cups and work to find you were not appreciated. We even grabbed your sister," said the monsters. "But the boss is impatient and he sent the third master after you to bring you back," said the monster with a long tongue. "If you don't want to get hit in the neck, then don't do anything stupid. Do you think these girls are enough to protect you? I'm surprised that your body healed so quickly early on." The monster with gray hair turned to Steve. "But that doesn't matter anymore!" All the monsters reached towards the girl. "You ran away once, there won't be a second one." But Rebecca was not going to give up. She prepared to defend herself. When the paws of the monsters were already near the girl, Steve covered her with himself. "So fast!" The gray-haired monster was surprised when he saw how quickly Steve moved. "Don't think that we are weaklings!" Steve prepared to strike. The guy's fist crashed right into the hand of the monster that he wanted to grab the girl. "You're not strong enough, you're just fast," said the monster, not sensing danger from Steve. "Long tongue, go get the girl." Gray-haired turned to the green monster. But turning his head, he saw that the body of the green monster had been decapitated. His head was in Leo's hand. Leo calmly looked towards the surprised monster. "This child," thought the monster, who still could not come to his senses. "How did he do it? Long Tongue was a junior war hero. The first blow was a bait," Steve said, turning to the gray-haired man. "But now I'm ready for the real blow." The guy used the power of his fighting spirit and struck. His fist crashed right into the nose of the gray-haired monster. "He caught him!" Lily exclaimed joyfully. "These two," Rebecca thought, watching the fight. "Is that what they are like?" She couldn't believe that these guys protected her. "This is not just a blow." Steve turned to the monster. After the blow that Steve dealt, the monster began to crumble into pieces. "Interesting," Steve said. "Not a real body." The guy stood near a pile of ashes, which was a dummy. The monster ran away. "Leo, we are pursuing?" Steve turned, but he was no longer there. "Wait for me, enemies!" He decided to go in search of the gray-haired monster. "Come back soon!" Lily shouted back to him. "Wait for me!" the guy shouted. "Those two children, who are they?" Rebecca asked Lily, sinking to the floor. "Are you okay, sis?" Lily asked excitedly. The gray-haired monster who escaped rushed through the dark streets. Fear was visible in his eyes. "Where did these children come from? It's good that I have a rescue hook," he thought. "This blow is dangerous. I'll get seriously hurt next time." The monster remembered Steve's blow, especially this one. He immediately remembered Leo, who dealt with his long tongue. "It's like if I didn't run away right away." His face was covered with sweat from fear. "Next time I will be dead," he continued to run, thinking about this horror. "I definitely have to tell my brother this." He ran out from around the corner. At speed, he did not notice that someone was standing in front of him. It was Leo. He was waiting for the monster. He only needed to raise his leg to knock him to the ground. From the blow, the monster flew back and hit his back against the wall with all his might. He slowly slid down the wall and fell to his knees in front of Leo. He felt pain all over his body. Leo stood and calmly watched the monster. He knew that victory would be his. "You!" said the monster. He recognized him and was even more horrified. "Hello," Leo told him. There was absolute calm on his face. "You're a bastard!" The monster roared fiercely, turning to Leo. "How dare you? I am also one of the leaders of 3A. Come out, Icebone's ghost!" He appealed to his fighting spirit. A huge skull appeared immediately behind him. "In the name of 3A, either you die today or I do," said the monster. Steve ran to find Leo and the monster. This Leo is a child, he thought. He looks so cruel. Steve remembered how Leo got rid of the monster. If you think about it like that, I don't know anything about him. Plus, there's the little girl who jumps around him all day long. He continued to think as he ran, not to mention his only spirit and his abilities. His gaze stopped more seriously. Let's just forget about it. I'll catch up with this Leo from asking about 3A with a thin face, he decided. Everything was restored when I saw an empty alley in front of me. It seems I lost, he said, upset. Let's see what's going on there. He headed towards the sounds. After some time, he flew into the alley where Leo and the monster were. This smell, such a strong, unpleasant, metallic smell. He realized what this could mean. What? He turned his head to understand where the sounds and smell were coming from. Leo, Steve saw him. This is not necessary, he told him. The monster was chained to the wall in an unnatural position. Leo stood next to him. Steve, you came just in time, he answered him. Previously, I was warming up. Combat energy came out of his hands. Let's start the battle, Leo said, and prepared to use his power. Let's start the fight, Leo said to Steve, restraining himself with his strength. Come on, Steve answered. Fred decided to get some fresh air. He sat calmly on the roof. A small red kitten approached him and began to meow. Pie, do you want some food? He asked the cat. Hearing his name, the kitten jumped into his arms. You're out of luck, Pie. I don't have any food with me, Fred answered, spreading his arms to the sides. At that moment, a feather flew near his shoulder. Fred immediately knew whose it was. I have to say, I haven't seen you for a long time, he asked. Or get out of here. Phoenix and Sarah appeared near Fred. Or maybe I hope you're okay, Phoenix, Phoenix answered sarcastically. At this time, Steve and Leo were preparing to fight each other. Leo was decisive. He was ready to attack at any moment. I'm also very curious about your spirit of war, said Steve. Then come on, Leo suggested, starting. After making several jumps, Leo found himself next to Steve. He was super fast. His hand to stab Steve in the face. But Steve managed to dodge the blow at the last moment. You're really fast. Are you the fast type? Asked Steve. Leo swung again, but Steve, bending a little, dodged the blow again. We can learn from each other, Steve suggested. A bluish haze appeared in front of Steve's face. It was some kind of unusual dust. In Leo's hand, there was something like an artifact from which this dust came. Leo waved his hand. From this wave, Steve lost his balance and fell. Why are you still fighting me? He asked Leo. Leo raised his leg to strike Steve, who was still sitting on the ground. At the last moment, Leo changed his mind and kicked the ground near Steve. The guy was thrown up and lost his balance again. Are you serious? Okay, let's fight. Steve got angry. Steve. Leo remembered something. He remembered his conversation with Fred. Fred then told him that he must fulfill one condition. Destroy Steve. Leo understood that it would not be easy because Steve was strong. I'm also curious about his warrior spirit, Fred told him then. The power you summoned that day makes me want to defeat you, Steve, Leo told him. Having released his spirit of war, Leo attacked Steve again, forcing him to show his aggression. So I can see him, Leo thought, and kicked Steve. Leo continued to throw punches and attack Steve. The guy went somersaulting, hitting the ground. Let me see again the strength you showed that day. He attacked Steve again. Everything around Steve began to shake, but nothing was visible because of the dust. When Leo reached out his hand to grab Steve, he intercepted it. There was a power in his hand that was not his. "Leo, you are trying to kill me like everyone else," said Seal in a rough voice, his fighting spirit standing behind him. This smell, Leo immediately remembered how when there was a competition he smelled the same smell. Like that day, and what does he mean by like everyone else? Leo asked mentally. "Answer me," Steve demanded, still holding Leo's hand. "Why?" the guy continued, his face was distorted with anger and aggression. Taking advantage of the fact that Steve was a little distracted, Leo dealt him a serious blow, causing him to crash into the wall. "To become stronger," Leo finally answered, pressing Steve's head against the stone wall. "Is this enough, or is another reason needed?" he asked. Steve started talking some nonsense. "I don't know why they are following me! You can't—" He talked, and Leo held him in place. Steve waved his hands to free himself from Leo. Two strong streams of energy were released from his hands. Leo covered himself with his hand, and Steve, taking advantage of the moment, jumped up, flying right over Leo's head. "You can't." He continued to say something, losing clarity of thought. "I thought we could become friends," Leo thought, watching Steve. Steve continued to throw punches in different directions, as if he could not stop. "I won't let you talk about this nonsense," Leo finally said. "You have lost concentration. Cracks of space mirrors." He turned to Steve, calling on his fighting spirit. "Mirrors?" Steve asked, having come to his senses a little. "I hate the word friends," Steve said when Leo approached him. Steve swung his fist and punched Leo right in the face. "Show yourself!" Now Steve began to provoke Leo. "Since you don't know how to summon your spirit of war." Leo began to gain speed. He decided to summon his spirit. Steve watched this with interest. The fragments from Leo scattered in different directions. "Looks like all I need to do is," Leo said as the fighting spirit started to activate. "Beat it out of you." He finished his address. His fighting spirit looked special. He was dressed in white, and two yellow ribbons with different symbols formed around him and Leo. "My spirit of war, mirror division," he finally said. When Leo called upon his fighting spirit, Lily, who was far away from him, felt something. "What happened, Lily?" Rebecca asked when she saw the excited expression on the girl's face. "I'm fine, I'm just worried about my master," she answered, dropping the jar from her hands to the floor. "He is very strong, Lily. You don't have to worry about him. With his strength, he will be safe," Rebecca reassured her. "Hooray! It is perfectly!" Lily's mood immediately improved. "I think I was worried for no reason," she said, looking out the window. "Steve!" Leo was approaching him from touching the ground. Blue mirror flames split from under his feet. Even if there was nothing, he continued to approach. "I want to fight you." He was a few meters away from Steve. Steve stood in one place. He simply looked at the approaching Leo. "Okay," Steve whispered quietly, bowing his head in doom. "I can't die right after I left the village. I really worked really hard to get into Luogi College. And I didn't have time to be happy because it was my first time working in a team," Steve said. Leo simply listened to his story without interrupting or making any attempts to mouth. "But why? Why do you want to push me away?" Steve asked with a hint of despair, clenching his fists. "I hate fighting." His voice began to tremble. "I just want to live an ordinary life with my mother." The voice became more and more trembling. His fighting spirit followed him, engulfing him in red flames. "Is this his spirit of war?" Leo asked. Steve's voice completely broke and he could not finish. He tried again. His spirit was gloomy. He seemed to be trying with Steve's bitterness. What a terrifying force. Leo looked at the spirit and at Steve. He was at a loss. Steve could no longer hold on. He grabbed his head when he heard the roar of the beast. It was his spirit. He fell to his knees, still holding his head. He was in great pain. At the same moment, a phoenix approached him, which appeared out of nowhere and began to stroke his head, calming him down. "Everything is fine, Steve, everything is fine," he said, continuing to stroke his head. Steve's spirit began to drift away from him. "Everything is fine." Phoenix, using his power, began to drive away Steve's fighting spirit from him. This man, Leo thought, trying to remember where he could see Phoenix. Leo remembered the Phoenix. He had heard about him. Chapter of 5 Heroes, Leo thought. 100 birds, Phoenix. Leo remembered everything he knew about him. "Stop, Steve. Not your enemy." Turned his head towards Leo Phoenix. "Why? Are you his guardian angel?" Leo asked. Phoenix thought for a while. Phoenix held Steve by the shoulders, looking straight into his slightly teary eyes. "I'm just a temporary guide," Phoenix finally answered. "Phoenix," Steve said. He was glad to see him. Steve's fighting spirit slowly began to return to his body. Leo watched all this. He was a little disappointed. "Oh dear." "Are you here?" Fred said pretendingly. Leo's fighting spirit was still with him. He was still ready to do something. "You really are not patient, Leo." The brother jumped out of the window. A kitten was sitting on his head. "I was going home to take a shower and you two decided to fight?" Fred pretended to know nothing. "Fred, Phoenix, what's going on?" Steve asked them in confusion. "This is not a place to talk," Fred answered, the happy kitten still sitting on his head. "Let's go back to the hostel," he suggested. They were all already sitting in the room. None of them said anything. The silence hurt my ears. Steve was angry, and so was Rebecca. They were waiting for answers. "What was that? What happened?" Rebecca finally asked, unable to bear it. "This guy, he doesn't look good at first glance." She thought about Fred, who was still sitting silently with his eyes down on the floor. "And this guy," Rebecca thought about the phoenix, who was smiling. "It cannot be that he is the head of 5 heroes, 100 birds, a phoenix." Her thoughts were interrupted. "Huh? Who are you?" Fred finally asked her. "My name is Rebecca. I'm from a low level and I have a sister." The girl began to talk about herself. "What happened to the door?" Fred asked, interrupting the girl. "Some members of 3A came and so—" Steve answered. "Young master!" Lily looked at Leo excitedly. Depressed since he arrived, he didn't say anything, just stood silently and watched the others. Lily was worried about this. "Lily," he finally turned to her. "Yes, what is this really important thing that you decided to tell me about, young master?" The girl exclaimed joyfully. "Comb your hair," he answered. "So, girls, go to your rooms and rest. We need to talk a little," Fred finally said. "Steve," Phoenix turned to him when he also wanted to leave the room. "Let's talk too," Phoenix suggested. "Okay, sorry to bother you." Lily and Rebecca headed out of the room, leaving the guys alone. Somewhere in Luogi College, in one of the old abandoned rooms, where there was a lot of cobwebs and dust. Sarah came into the room. It was dark and cool here. "It must be here," the girl thought. "Help me get something from Luoga College." She remembered the conversation with Phoenix. "What is this?" she asked him then. "Roger hid something in college," Phoenix answered her. This information shocked Rebecca a little. "I can't get this on my own, so I'm asking for your help, Sarah," he told her. "This matter should be confidential, just between you and me," he ordered her. "Take this. This thing in this room." Phoenix handed Rebecca a vial of red liquid. "This can only be seen with spiritual attraction with Roger's blood," thought Rebecca. She looked at the small bottle in her palm. "It doesn't matter how I look at her," she said. "It seems like a completely normal room." Rebecca was inside. She took a bottle out of her pocket, opened it, and applied a little on her finger, then brought it to my forehead, making a big dot on me. When everything was ready, the girl used her power, and her eyes began to glow purple. Now she could see what she had not seen before. The entire room she was in was painted with red signs and symbols. There were only drawings from ceiling to floor. In one of the areas of Luogi College, where Area 3A was located, one of the team members reported to the second leader while kneeling in front of him. "What's younger? If they saw me on the teams, this is the honest truth." He began the report. "What?" asked him the second leader, a well-fed man who was overeating at the table. "Are you saying that the child beheaded the leader of 3A in 1 second?" he asked, biting off a piece of meat, clearly not believing it. "What are you talking about?" he said, with his mouth full of food. "It's true! Second leader?" The guy confirmed his words. "I was nearby, and when I arrived, I saw that the guy began to remember. That the second leader was destroyed," said the guy. "And a boy with blue hair and light around him stood in front of him," he continued. "Big brother?" asked the second leader, addressing one of the team members. "I don't feel the spirit of my third brother," answered a guy very similar to Leo. "Most likely this is his brother." "It looks like someone is trying to provoke us," the guy continued. "Everything from 3A is preparing for battle." Each of the team took up a weapon and took their places in preparation for defense. Fred and Leo finally met without prying eyes. They had questions for each other. "It's no use looking at me like that, Leo. You look too impatient," Fred said, smiling. "No, I'm in a hurry," Leo told him. "Then you have to slow down," Fred calmly told him. They stood opposite each other, and there was a sense of mistrust between them. "You found out that Steve can't control his spirit yet," said Fred. "His spirit of war, what is it?" Leo asked. "So," Fred said, hesitating a little with his answer, "I still can't explain it," the guy continued. "But simply put, a state of reverse control," Fred suggested. "So for now, Steve is not your target," Fred said calmly. "You two are like 2 different fires, but you don't understand why you're burning," Fred explained. "So you need to calm down, Leo." Fred approached him. "You smell," Leo told him. He clearly didn't like being in his company. "Smoking is romance for adults. You don't understand anything," Fred answered him. "Fred, don't let Steve and Leo fight just yet," Phoenix told him as the two of them sat on the roof. Steve is like an unstable bomb and no one can disarm it, Phoenix continued. And if it explodes, you won't be able to afford it. I have a proposal regarding Leo, said Phoenix when an idea appeared in his head. What a joke. Why should I listen to you? Asked Fred. Aren't you afraid of the secret that I will tell you? Asked Phoenix. Fred looked exposed at this point. Where did I think about this? I got angry, Fred thought, looking at Phoenix with anger. Fred advanced on Phoenix, his face expressing aggression. What are you doing? Asked Phoenix. Nothing, Fred answered. He realized that he needed to calm down. You have a new task, Fred continued. Phoenix and Steve were in a room that was slightly destroyed due to Monsters 3A. Steve, Phoenix called out to the guy. He only slightly raised his head, which he was picking up with his hands standing near the balcony. I haven't seen you for a while. It seems you've grown up. Phoenix came closer to him. Steve turned to face him. Maybe I've grown a little? The guy laughed in response. Not in this sense, said Phoenix. In the sense that you realize the cruelty of the world towards you. Phoenix explained to him. Phoenix, can I ask about what you said earlier? The guy scratched his head, choosing words. I'm just a temporary guide. Steve remembered Phoenix's words during the battle with Leo. You said temporary. You mean you will leave me too, right? Steve asked a little hesitantly. I ask you, Phoenix. Steve carefully watched his expression. Even if you deceived me, everything is fine. Although he tried to say it confidently, his voice trembled. Phoenix searched for words for a while. Finally, he simply said, Yes. It seems that I am the most hated person in the world. Steve pulled his hair. Tears appeared in his eyes. He felt a little broken. I'm fine. I'm so stupid. Why am I crying? I understand you're busy too, but don't worry. Steve was still crying but couldn't explain why. It's just that when I hear this, I become sad. Steve already had a smile on his face. He was able to pull himself together. I hope you understand everything. Phoenix approached Steve and put his hand on his head, calming the guy down. I refuse, Leo said, still talking to Fred. Refusal is not accepted. He asked you to go on this mission, Fred said. No, I refuse. Leo stood his ground. There will be a deal. If you do this and come back, Fred continued. I will tell you how to become stronger, just like I did last time, Fred continued to assure Leo. How about this? He asked Leo and winked at him. Leo thought for a bit, weighing the pros and cons. Where are you going? Fred asked when Leo, without saying anything, got ready to leave. Don't forget your promise, I'll do it, Leo said, turning his head towards Fred. Should I say that he is innocent or is he obsessed with his power? Fred thought when Leo disappeared from sight. Even though there was a small accident, don't forget about your missions, Fred said when everyone gathered in the room except Leo. Steve noticed that someone was missing, but Lily beat him to it. Excuse me, sir, but where is my young master? The girl asked Fred, showing her concern. Take it. In response, he handed her a red kitten. Don't worry, he should be back soon, Fred reassured Lily. Come on, I'll lend you my first cat. He sat the kitten on her head. Oh, good. The girl was happy about the little kitten. What about you, ? I remember you're Rebecca, right? Phoenix asked her. The girl immediately turned her attention to him. She clenched her hands into fists, showing her readiness to join their squad. Let me step in, please! My sister is still in the clutches of 3A. I will try to save her, but 3A is too strong. I almost died then. Please. Let me join you guys, Rebecca asked desperately. Steve, decide, Phoenix said, interrupting Fred, turning to the guy. Fred looked angrily at Phoenix, who just shrugged. Yes, okay, after all, I don't mind Steve. Fred finally gave in, letting Steve decide. I rely on you, Fred added. Steve stood and looked at Rebecca. He tried to make the right choice. Please. The girl looked at Steve with a plea in her eyes. There is hope in your eyes. You are really luckier than me. Steve thought about Rebecca, smiling. He remembered how he cried on the balcony next to Phoenix. He felt lonely then. Of course, Steve finally said, deciding to take Rebecca into his squad. Phoenix had the city behind him. Let's take a break today. We'll find 3A tomorrow, said Steve. Morning came and Steve was asleep in his bed. The morning sun was shining directly on his face. He felt something touching his cheek. Opening his eyes, he was joyfully surprised. A bird sat next to him, baby. The guy was very happy to see him. Where have you been? I was so worried about you. I didn't have time to look for you. Come back and don't run away again. I'm not used to your absence, the guy said joyfully, taking the bird in his arms. Phoenix, the bird is back. Phoenix, look. Steve ran out of his bedroom in search of Phoenix. I was going to ask you today about... The guy began joyfully, but then his mood worsened. He saw that Phoenix was not here. Rebecca, the kitten, and Lily were having breakfast together. "Good morning, Brother Steve. Ready tomorrow?" Lily greeted him joyfully. "Are you looking for Master Phoenix? He left in the morning, came to your room, but you seemed asleep. Then he didn't wake you up," she explained to the child and switched to Lily, praising the food she had prepared. "Left," Steve thought, upset. Phoenix actually came to Steve's room in the morning to say goodbye. But the guy was sleeping and Phoenix did not wake him up. He straightened his blanket and left the room. "We will meet later. I will definitely be stronger," Steve thought, and headed to the table where the girls were sitting. At this time, the Phoenix was somewhere in the forest, watching a bird flying up into the air. He finally spread his wings. "Phoenix, it's rare to see you surprised." Sarah was sitting on a tree next to him, watching him. "Sarah, you are really very insightful," he told her, smiling. "Time to agree," she reminded him of his duty. Okay, he answered her.
"Sarah, did you get the information?" he asked, becoming more serious.
"This thing, I'm afraid you have to see it yourself," the girl answered. Several people stood near Gate 3A. They were talking about something. "Have you heard about the death of the third leader?" one of them asked the other. "Yes, I heard about it. Now this is a mess, but yesterday the first leader ordered everyone to be ready for battle," answered the second one. "Sorry." They heard someone's voice near them. They immediately turned their heads in that direction. "Where is the toilet?" Lily asked them, stamping her feet, drawing their attention to her. "Stop! Stay there! Who are you?" one of them asked Lily, furious. "What brought you here? What are you even doing?" the second one shouted. Tears appeared in Lily's eyes. She was stalling for time as best she could. "What's wrong with you guys? Lily is so cute." Steve appeared out of nowhere. He was right behind the backs of the two guys. "This is a lie! Too obvious a trick! Do you think you can fool us?" One of the guys swung his fist at Steve. "Do you think you can take us with such a banal trick?" said the second one, and tried to grab Steve. It was close, Steve thought, shortening from 1 and 2. The guy jumped back, avoiding the blows. "Good moves. Look like you can do something," said one of them, turning to Steve. "Don't look down on us. We'll have a backup soon," said one guy, clenching his hands into fists. "He seems to be the partner of the guy with blue hair." "Then they won't come back," said the second one. "Where did you get such confidence?" Two guys attacked him at once, but Steve continued to dodge the blows. He began to pick up speed as he continued to run around them. "Have you decided to run away from us? Come on, get out and fight!" one of them shouted to him. "Lily, stay away," she told the girl who hid behind his leg. "Before reinforcements arrive, we will destroy it. We can't lose to someone like him." Two from Squad 3A rushed towards Steve, intending to kill him. "Stop dodging!" one of them shouted at him as Steve dodged from each of his blows. "I don't dodge," Steve answered him, raising his fist. His fist crashed straight into his stomach and he flew to the side from the force of the blow. At this moment, another one crept up behind Steve, using all his strength, prepared to strike him. "Brother Steve, turn around!" Lily shouted to him, nervously biting her nails. "I was just waiting for the right moment," Steve said calmly, preparing to repel the attack. "To take you with him." Steve suddenly turned around sharply, put his leg up, and hit the guy attacking him. He did a somersault and fell to the second one on the ground. Someone entered Steve's mother's house, knocking down the door, and the woman fell to the floor, scattering a basket of fruit. "Ma'am, do you think you can redeem yourself by sending Steve away?" the man asked, hovering over her. "My father, the head of the village," he continued, his eyes flashing angrily. "He is very upset thanks to you," the man said. Steve's mom grabbed her pendant. She was silent. "Therefore, you must pay for my angry father, ma'am," the man continued. The woman looked up at him furiously. "We pay a fee every month, like all other families, so why—" the woman began indignantly, but he interrupted her. "Shut your mouth, you and your son. No, the existence of your family is a crime. Because of your existence, our village is completely unknown," he shouted, pointing his finger at her. "Do you think it is fair to do such a thing?" "Well, that's not true. It is rude to ask such ridiculous and shameless requests from the weak," the woman asked calmly, raising her gaze to him. "With such a crooked face," she answered, gathering all her confidence. "How dare you say that to me?" The man was indignant at her words. "You know, it doesn't matter," he smiled. His tone implied something bad. "At first I planned to use force," said the man who broke into the house of Steve and his mother. He took his small knife out of his pocket. "Ha ha! Look, ma'am, I'll be very gentle with you." He smiled his nasty smile, which made the woman shudder a little. He swung his knife over the women's heads, but at that moment his knife was already in the hand of another person. The man didn't even have time to say anything when, with the speed of the wind, he flew through the wall into the courtyard. The door was open, and I went inside. Leo said it was he who took the knife from the threatening man and threw him out into the street, through the wall. "This is Steve's house, right?" Leo asked the woman, who could not get over the shock and remained sitting on the floor. In the zone of military heroes in Group 3A, things were not calm. Steve was on his first mission. Although it was difficult, Steve was able to cope with the group alone. He scattered them all in different directions. "You deserve to be beaten," Lily shouted at one of the participants 3A. "It seems this is Lily's revenge," Steve thought, watching the girl. "This is a very unfortunate victory for us," said Steve when he killed all the guys from 3A. Lily agreed with him. "We originally planned for Steve to strike first and for me to deliver the killing blow. I didn't expect him to do everything alone," Rebecca said as she approached them. Rebecca looked at Steve. She couldn't understand if he was really so strong that he single-handedly took down these two heroes. The girl immediately suspected something was wrong, because the previous time there were more than 20 guards at their gate. Now there was no one. She knew something was wrong. "We should go in now, right? It seems that 3A is too relaxed." Steve wanted to finish off their squad as quickly as possible. He was confident that he could do it. "Let's go," he confidently said to Rebecca and Lily, and they headed to the gate of Squad 3A. There were no guards or people on duty near the gate, so Steve and the girls calmly entered their territory. But they did not know that someone was still watching them through the camera. "Now we can surround and capture them." The one who was watching them was the second leader of Squad 3A. He was glad for this opportunity to avenge those whom Steve and his team killed. "There are only 3 of them. Should I let our first-class fighters destroy them? Besides, your little girl, Big Brother, is here," said the second leader, turning to Leo's brother, Trevor. "This child, although he was not the one who killed our third brother, we should not underestimate him." Trevor answered him in a serious tone, examining Steve and assessing him. The leader listened silently to brother Leo and thought about something. "It's not my fault, but I blame myself for what happened to my third brother." The guy was choosing words, and they were difficult for him. "Don't worry, Big Brother, I will go and deal with them myself. This is for the sake of my third brother," the big man said, and confidently walked towards a meeting with Steve. Trevor tensed when he heard his words. "Don't even say a word. I plan to avenge the third brother." The second leader summoned his fighting spirit, and a monster surrounded by a fireball immediately appeared behind him. When Steve and the girls crossed the threshold of the building, they were immediately attacked by Squad 3A. The guy was forced to use his strength to repel the attackers. He realized that it was all a trap. "They were going to drag us in and then capture us. I see that there are a lot of people here, but still your boss is not eager to show up. So why don't you bring your boss and see if we can meet?" Steve asked one of the opponents, who was lying on the floor. Several more people were approaching Rebecca and Steve. They all had weapons and did not look friendly. "Was it really a trap to force us inside?" "Looks like we're in trouble," the girl thought, watching those approaching from Detachment 3A. "This man, isn't he tired or needing to shave?" Rebecca looked at Steve, who looked a little confused. "Brother Steve, do you need my help?" Lily asked, watching as the guy doubted his actions a little. "Are you saying that you want to go there and give them a hard time?" Steve laughed, covering his insecurity with amusement in front of Lily. "Lily is very strong and angry," the girl answered him. "However, Leo is not here. We won't be able to mess things up. Lily, stay by my side, Rebecca. Please help me." Steve and Rebecca stood next to each other, covering Lily with themselves. They prepared to repel anyone who stood in their way. "Let's kill those 3. Several dozen guys from Squad 3A, armed, rushed at Steve and Rebecca. They ran and shouted various threats. "They're here, Steve. What's your plan?" asked the child, a little frightened by such a large number of opponents. "My plan is first I will go there and then—" Steve, like a little boy, muttered something, hesitantly scratching the back of his head. "No plan at all?" Rebecca asked angrily. "By the way, they are new and not very strong. We are better, and I fought with some of them. Just follow me. We will defeat them." Having said this, Steve grabbed his other hand with one hand, activating his combat power. "This is the only way. Your speed should help you too," Rebecca said, also activating her combat power. "And he is looking at us from above," someone from the enemy squad said angrily, watching Steve. "Guys!" The group heard that someone else had joined them. With one leap, he was in front of them. He jumped over a group of guys and flew over Steve. The guy was a little surprised. He didn't know who it was or what power he had. "Let me take the lead," the second leader said. And landing on the ground, his fighting spirit pushed Steve away. "What about this?" asked the leader. Smiling joyfully, he was anticipating revenge. The fighting spirit of the leader struck Steve in the face with his fiery fist, causing hellish pain to pierce the guy's head, and blood appeared on his lips. "Brother Steve," Lily wrote, covering her mouth with her hands in horror. Rebecca found out who it was. She immediately thought of the second leader, Mad Ben. The second leader introduced himself when everyone turned their attention to him. Behind him stood his warrior spirit, a monster in the form of a huge dog with bodies and a muscular body. All of it was covered in flames of fire. Steve gradually began to rise. "What kind of crazy power?" the guy thought, watching Ben. "First, I'll take them out of here," the guy thought, gathering his strength and planning his further actions. First of all, he grabbed Lily and, using his speed, carried away the girl. "I see that your reaction is really fast," Ben said when he saw how quickly Steve grabbed Lily to take her away from danger. "Between you and the blue-haired guy who killed my little brother, what's the difference in strength?" Ben asked, but changed his mind and immediately rushed at Steve. "Doesn't matter! Let me kill you now!" he shouted, approaching the guy. Steve was a few meters short of getting Lily to a safe place. He had to throw her to Rebecca as Ben was approaching him. Without blinking an eye, Rebecca caught the girl, who had terrified eyes. "Great grab!" Steve shouted to her. "Okay, stay away from here." Steve ordered Rebecca and Lily, protecting others for good reasons, Ben told him. "But you better make sure you don't die in the process." Ben struck Steve and the guy lost his balance and landed on the floor. "Turbine bombardment!" Ben shouted, using one of the attack techniques on the enemy. "Would you like to say goodbye to your family?" Ben asked Steve, who was lying on the ground. "No need," the guy answered. Ben looked down in surprise. "Are you still alive?" he asked with annoyance. Steve used force to kick Ben while he was a little distracted. He cut his face and threw him against the wall. A few seconds later, having come to his senses a little, Ben touched his cheek with his hand in surprise. He wrapped his power around his legs to form a blade and attack from a cloud of smoke. "This guy is pretty smart," Ben thought, remembering Steve's move. "He is not an ordinary child." Steve, at this time, behind clouds of smoke, made a revolution to be on his feet. Having done a somersault, Steve was already on his haunches. The smoke began to dissipate a little. "I have several broken ribs, but I just escaped a fatal blow. This hurts. I'll prepare for the next blow." The guy thought through the pain throughout his body. "Rebecca, Lily, turn around! Don't come closer!" Steve shouted to the girls through the pain, fearing for their lives. "Steve, your wounds, what can I do?" Rebecca asked. She was very sorry for the guy. "Brother Steve, I will cure you," Lily told him with tears in her eyes. "The second leader is not someone you can handle alone. Why? Even if you do not realize the strength of the enemy. How do you fight him without fear?" Rebecca mentally asked Steve, admiring his courage and perseverance. "Are you not afraid of death?" The girl couldn't believe it, watching Steve. "Don't worry about those two girls, after all. One of them will become the boss's girlfriend and the other is just a child. We are not animals," said the second leader, realizing how worried Steve was about them. "Last time it was a mistake. This girl was too rude to our guys, it's true," Ben continued. "She really deserves to be the boss's girlfriend," he continued, looking straight at Rebecca. "You guys kidnapped my sister to force me to do what you want," Rebecca said in response. "Terrible people," Lily confirmed. "As I said, it was a mistake. Our guys were too alarmed." Ben answered this. "But you killed our younger brother. This cannot be forgotten," he said, clenching his hands into fists in front of him. "Also, you dared to come to our base!" His eyes were bloodshot with anger. "I will avenge my third brother." Having said this, Ben raised his fist, blazing with fire at Steve. "Turbine bombardment. I want to see you come back this time," Ben said, attacking Steve with his fighting spirit. "Is this happening again?" "I won't be able to dodge," Steve thought, wondering what he should do next. "I will face this again," the guy finally thought, releasing his military spirit. "In this matter, I am not hiding," Steve shouted, jumping up at Ben, who clearly did not expect this. "What is this?" Ben hesitated a little, but a second later, he saw his own technique in front of him. "You know, you helped me realize a few things. This action is called washing bombardment." Steve called Ben's technique. Did he just use the second leader's move right after the leader did it? So, is this possible? Squad 3A were shocked by what they saw. Did he learn this move while he was fighting? "Is this possible?" Rebecca asked in surprise. "Having seen that I did it once or twice, you were able to copy it. This is impressive." Ben answered him, blocking Steve's attack. "But it doesn't hurt," Not even a little. You are silly, said Otherwise. Ben ordered his fighting spirit to strike Steve. The monster's huge, fiery fist appeared in front of Steve again, and immediately struck. Lily and Rebecca screamed, worried about Steve, who had just fallen. Squad 3A supported their second leader. Steve approached Ben again, but was immediately thrown back again. The guy flew across the room and fell. Rebecca managed to catch him so that he would not hit the ground again, causing himself even more harm. Why didn't we retreat now? Rebecca asked Steve, lying near her feet. In response, he just laughed. How do you like my fist? Ben asked Steve, who was clearly not going to give up while the guy was alive. I finally understand why Fred said this. We can only make progress on our own. The guy repeated the mentor's words, smiling. The full name of this technique, which I just used, is turbine beating. Steve continued. What? Ben asked in fear, and immediately after that, his military fighting spirit exploded, scattering into small pieces. Rebecca and Lily exclaimed joyfully, but the entire Squad 3A remained standing, with stony expressions on their faces, not believing what was happening. The second leader, Ben, was defeated. To be honest, your fist doesn't taste very good. What about mine? Steve asked, smiling. Brother Leo, Trevor sat in the second leader's office for some time. He soon learned that he had been destroyed. Time to leave this place, Trevor decided, realizing that he too could be in danger. I can't believe it. I just lost it. How is it? With the last of his strength, Ben thought, still lying on the floor. Ben remembered their entire trinity. The three of us, we are already going at it. So far, step by step. How could you? Ben gathered all his strength and hit the floor with his fist. Die! He shouted and rushed to attack again. Rebecca got ahead of him and jumped up and kicked him right in the face. I knew that you would stab me in the back, the girl said, angry. Second leader! Second leader! The guys from Squad 3A began shouting to him excitedly. She really deserves to be the boss's girlfriend, Ben finally managed to say before falling to the ground again. Your second leader just lost. Even if your whole gang attacks me, I won't lose, Rebecca answered sternly to everyone present. She's right. We can't defeat her, and that guy is still alive. What to do? Besides, last time she ran away and even defeated us, and she is also the boss's girlfriend. Hey, that guy! Everyone present from Detachment 3A discussed. Decided? They made one decision with which everyone agreed. Quickly, let's go tell everything to the boss. If you can, follow us. Let's move forward quickly. The whole group headed towards the exit from the hall with which a battle had taken place a few minutes ago. The second leader remained lying on the floor. They really ran away, cowards, Steve said, watching them swarm. But we finally defeated him. Before reinforcements arrive straight from 3A, let's go from here, said Steve. He was limping a little. Yeah, first we'll find a place where we can take care of your wounds, Rebecca told him. Wait, let's take this guy first. Steve turned his head back, looking at the still lying second leader. Did you really run away and leave the second leader behind? Trevor asked those who were next to him during the battle. Forgive us. We just wanted to come and tell you what happened. We didn't want to leave the second leader behind. They justified themselves, lowering their heads. As a great power, we must always be ready to face life and death, said Trevor. Thank you for your hard work and work. Now I feel much better. Steve thanked Lily when she finished treating his wounds. This is all because Brother Steve is physically recovering very quickly, the girl answered. It's been like this since I was a child. I recover quickly, and this happens to me even in my sleep. Mom says it's God's gift, but I don't know if it's good or bad, Steve explained to Lily. No, it's not just that. He has an amazing ability to learn. How can I be as strong as him? The guy said a little sadly. This guy's name is Leo. I heard that he killed the third leader. How strong is he? The girl thought. Oh, by the way! She heard Steve address and immediately turned her head towards him. Thank you, Rebecca. The guy thanked her for her help. If you hadn't done this, I would already be dead. It's good to know you can have my back, he added. Helping others is natural, and you did all the work before I finished it off, so don't thank me. Rebecca answered, flushed. In any case, you helped me a lot. Lily approached him. She brought him food. The guy was happy. Rebecca thought how amazing Lily is. At that moment, she noticed something. The wall Rebecca was standing next to began to crack. They all heard a blow in the same place. In an instant, someone burst into the room, knocking out this piece of the wall. It was Trevor, and he immediately attacked Steve. Rebecca and Lily looked at what was happening in confusion. Trevor lunged straight at Steve, stabbing him in the stomach. Steve flew through the opposite wall, breaking it with his back. He drove through the grass on the street. They put a furrow behind him. Who is this anyway? Steve asked furiously. Verse raised his head up and saw someone's hand in front of him. It was purple, with long claws. Trevor attacked Steve, punching him. Steve began to resist, but his injury did not really allow him to do this. The guy called on his fighting spirit. It gave him a little strength, and he began to rise. Steve did a somersault in the air. He was already on all fours and ready to fight again. Trevor looked at Steve in surprise. The same one was approaching him. His eyes shone red. Without allowing Trevor to come to his senses, Steve struck him with an elbow, throwing him several meters back. Steve paused for a moment to assess the situation. Trevor was a few meters away. My wound has opened again. This is not good, Steve thought, holding his hand to his side without losing sight of his enemy. Trevor waved his cloak, covering his face. We finally met. Uninvited guest, Trevor said to Steve, finally throwing off his cloak and revealing his face. You are the head of Group 3A. It's good that you came here, Steve said, still holding his side where the wound was. Saved me from having to look for you. Steve immediately became defensive, not paying attention to the pain. I can't let him know about my wounds, the guy thought. Malloy, there really are a lot of different monsters at Sunset Academy, Trevor told him.
Brother Steve! Rebecca and Lily rushed to Steve.
Steve, are you okay? Asked Rebecca. I'm very well, don't worry, he answered her. Rebecca and Lily looked at each other. At that moment, Trevor turned his attention to them. Rebecca, he asked in surprise. She also looked at him in surprise. It seems like we can't see each other face to face. I hope I can explain this to you clearly after I finish, he finally said, turning to the girl. Well, in that case, let's settle this issue, said Trevor. I am the most important in 3A, the Evil Eagle. Let me give you a little advice. Know your place, Trevor said, using his fighting strength. When I said let's resolve this issue, I meant a fight. Trevor rushed at Steve. The guy flew over himself from the blow, leaving behind scattered leaves and earth. He's fast, Steve thought, watching Trevor's speed. Trevor hit Steve again. You won't be able to hide this time, he told him. Steve jumped using his power. When Trevor tried to catch him, the guy was no longer there. Trevor began to search for him with his eyes, looking around. Steve landed again and bounced back up, confusing Trevor. The guy repeated the same technique again. He used his spirit to shoot at the ground and rose into the air with the help of shockwaves. And he dodged my attack, thought Trevor. Smart guy, it's no wonder my second brother couldn't cope with him. Trevor continued to watch Steve. But I won't let you rest. Trevor said this and rushed after Steve. Dilution turbine, Steve exclaimed, using a familiar technique. This was the same technique with which Steve defeated the second leader.
This is a technique. Trevor felt something was wrong.
Fierce air! Trevor used his technique. Their powers clashed. This battle is clearly not at my level, Rebecca thought, watching the fight. This is too strong! Steve's wound will get worse! Lily was worried. Wonderful welcome, Trevor told him. Steve also wanted to answer him something. And you don't, Steve began. He couldn't speak. Something was happening to his body, and he could not understand what it was. This is it, Trevor said when he saw the panic in Steve's eyes. A sharp pain pierced his whole body. He could not move. It was even difficult to breathe. Die! Having gathered his strength, he shouted strength to Trevor. Steve landed on the ground and did not stand in front of Trevor. The guy's legs were holding him up. He felt like he could fall at any moment. Turbine! Said Steve, activating his power and sending it at Trevor. Steve was afraid of missing, so he looked closely at Trevor. His power was still in his hand. Trevor decided not to wait for Steve's attack. He made a funnel to also attack him. Their power shifted. Rebecca and Lily were very worried about Steve when they lost sight of him. Boss! Boss! Students from Detachment 3A ran towards where the battle was taking place. What? The attack that ended the second leader of 3A didn't hurt him one bit? Rebecca watched as Trevor took off his cloak, which protected him. He used his cloak to protect himself from attacks. The boss is amazing! Shouted the members of Squad 3A. Bring the spirit into the attack and then strike exactly in a second, causing damage to the inside and outside, Trevor said joyfully, explaining his actions to defeat the enemy. My brother was destroyed by this technique, added Trevor. Do you know what advantages the eagle has? Trevor asked, turning to Steve. Incredibly sharp eyes. Your abdominal wound, I noticed it immediately after the first blow, Trevor admitted. Right now you can't move because of your wound, right? I respect you a little, Trevor continued. Therefore, I will let you die quickly. He activated the power of his spirit. Boss War Spirit, this is the fierce air! One of those present exclaimed. Lily and Rebecca froze in horror watching all this. Trevor threw his hand forward and attacked Steve. The guy was thrown back by the wave. Steve fell to his knees, no longer able to stand on his feet. His hands touched the ground. Knockout! Trevor shouted. Still using his power, Trevor attacked Steve with his power. For my second and third brother, Trevor shouted towards Steve. I can't get up, my body. You couldn't move, and for a while you just tried to stay on your feet. This! The guy shouted. Trevor looked up at him in surprise. Hello, I received your message. Leo approached Trevor and put his hand on his shoulder, stopping him. Everyone present had great difficulty seeing what was happening there. A lot of smoke rose around Steve and Trevor. Hey, I have a message for you. Leo addressed Steve. Rebecca couldn't believe it. Leo! Steve couldn't believe his eyes. I will destroy you! Trevor shouted, swinging at Leo. Before Trevor could come to his senses, Leo was no longer in front of him. He looked closely. I think I killed him, Trevor said joyfully. A useless technique. He heard Leo's voice behind him. Trevor quickly jumped to the opposite side of Leo and Steve. They glared at each other, each of them eager to kill each other. How did he end up near me? How strong is he? Trevor thought, collecting his chaotic thoughts into a compartment. You are the head of Group 3A, right? Leo finally asked Trevor. Blue-haired, you are the one who brutally killed my third brother, right? Trevor asked with a cold look. Any problems? Leo calmly asked. Everyone present held their breath. They watched and wanted to find out what would happen next. How will this all end? Leo prepared himself and called on his fighting warrior spirit. Electrical energy formed around him. The spirit eagle appeared near Trevor. If so, you will die a painful death, Trevor, Leo said. Try it. Leo mimicked him, stopping his fighting spirit with one wave of his hand. Well, I can't believe it. He stopped the attack of the evil eagle with one hand. Does he have a mid-level war spirit? Asked the fisherman. How, at his age? How is this possible? The girl envied him, envied his strength. She really wanted to become the same. Leo and Trevor stood opposite each other. Each of them thought through their moves in advance to win. Stop! Steve interrupted them. Trevor and Leo immediately turned their attention to him. This is my fight, Steve said, turning to Leo and patting him on the shoulder. Leo looked at Steve silently, but did not argue. You shouldn't interfere, Leo. Steve answered his silent question. Steve, straightening his back, walked towards Trevor. Leo remained standing where he was, not interfering and allowing Steve to show what he was capable of. Your hidden power, Leo thought at that moment, but did not say anything. Steve stopped a few meters from Trevor. He began to stretch his arms, pulling himself up a little. Don't you mean to say that this is our fight? Let's continue. He turned to Trevor. This is the ability to quickly recover. Interesting, I'm impressed. Trevor said when he noticed that the wounds on Steve's body had healed. Okay, I'll kill you first, and then I'll take care of your friend. Trevor moved forward towards Steve. I will destroy you, Steve answered him, picking up speed. Their forces clashed together just like themselves. They created with them a bright burst of power and light. Boring, Leo said, watching the fight. Young master, you are back. Lily rushed to him. Where did you go? Rebecca asked him, but he didn't answer. He called Lily to him. Dust mixed with smoke rose around Steve and Trevor. They were not visible at all. All that was left was to guess what was happening there. Steve and Trevor attacked each other again and again. None of them gave up or even thought about it. You are very determined, Trevor told him. With the help of his strength, he inflicted another fatal move on Steve. Final explosion, Trevor said, and stretching his hand forward, flew up to Steve. That move that Leo stopped, Steve thought. When Trevor's power was near Steve, the guy could barely stand on his feet. I cannot allow myself to be destroyed. I need to dodge, Steve thought, looking for a plan for further action. At the last second, when Trevor's hand directed at Steve was a millimeter from the guy's face, he was still able to jump to the side, dodging the blow. But Trevor didn't like it. He stopped abruptly. It was just a trick, Trevor said, laughing, watching Steve's reaction. He grabbed Steve, threw him up, and punched him in the stomach. Your reaction is incredibly fast, but you still lack experience, Trevor said as Steve flew away and he landed on the ground. 1,000 wheel rims. Trevor used another technique. These discs immediately followed Steve, catching up with him. 1,000 wheels pierced Steve's body. Attendees from Squad 3, and they exclaimed joyfully, supporting their boss. Steve could not cope with this attack. When the forces left him, he fell to the ground. Trevor landed next to him. 1,000 wheel rims can damage the opponent's muscles. Even if you still have strength, you will not be able to stand up. Trevor said this. You're lucky you didn't die, guy, Trevor said when Steve did not make any sound, continuing to lie there. Your turn, blue-haired. Trevor turned to Leo, who still stood calmly on the sidelines. Rebecca was the first to jump out of her seat and rushed to run towards Trevor, but Leo stopped her. Come back, he ordered her. But Steve is there. The girl was indignant, not understanding why Leo did not allow her to fight Trevor. "It's not my turn to play yet," Leo answered her. "This guy really likes to show off," he said, closing his eyes wearily. Trevor didn't understand what was happening at all, but then he saw movement where Steve had recently been lying. The guy stood up, and his wounds began to heal. "Let's continue." He stood weakly on his feet, but insisted that the fight continue. "What power? How is this possible?" Trevor's eyes widened in surprise. "How strong are you?" Steve asked him. "Like you said, one of us will win," Steve repeated his words. "No one can interfere." Steve was already standing confidently on his feet. All his wounds on his body had completely healed. "Steve, I feel it again. Your strength makes me worry," Leo thought. "Steve? He's completely different now," Rebecca said, a little scared when she saw Steve. "Brother Steve, his wounds are recovering at an incredible speed." Lily was also surprised. "This is the same feeling that I hated before." Steve walked confidently, approaching Trevor. But now, Steve immediately remembered how just recently he was afraid of this feeling, closed his ears, and hated everyone around him. "I just don't let it take over me anymore," he said about his fighting spirit, which he could not control before. Steve lifted himself off the ground, leaving a bright red silhouette behind him. He flew up to Trevor. Trevor managed to jump away. Steve's hand crashed into the ground where he had just stood. Trevor released his claws and again rushed to attack Steve. Swinging his arm, he cut Steve's shoulder with his claws and attacked the guy from behind. Steve slowly turned his head in his direction. Trevor looked up at him in surprise. Steve stabbed him in the stomach, coughing. Trevor jumped back, giving himself a little break. Trevor stopped a few meters from Steve. "I looked down on you, but you turn out to be very strong," Trevor said. He himself did not expect this. "If so, do not underestimate the enemy from now on," Steve advised him. "Let's continue." Steve rushed forward again. He was furious and wanted to finish off his enemy as quickly as possible. Trevor also decided to use his most powerful weapon, before which it took him a lot of strength. "You rely on this trick!" Trevor shouted as Steve stabbed him again. But Trevor hardly even felt it. "Is the boss going to use this move?" "Yes, the strongest boss move," shouted from Trevor's support group. "Is he going to use the previous move to win?" Rebecca was scared for Steve. "Brother Steve, come on!" Lily supported him. "What a powerful force," said Leo. He still did not interfere, but simply observed. Piercing, ferocious void. Skill. Trevor released something like lightning from his hand, and after it flew up to Steve. Steve didn't even understand anything. He looked straight at Trevor and couldn't gather his thoughts. All those present fell silent in anticipation. They watched in horror at the turn of events. At that same second, Trevor's hand crashed into Steve's chest, making a hole through it. "He won!" "Group 3A, Steve shouted. Rebecca began to cry at what she saw. "Young master, he—" Lily couldn't find words. She couldn't stand it and started crying. "Hey guy, you're really good, but you can," Trevor told him. "I told you not to underestimate your opponent!" Steve grabbed his hand, which was still in Steve's body. "That's it, now you can't hide." Steve looked straight into Trevor's eyes. He was scared. Still holding his hand, Steve stabbed him. "Did you want me to attack you?" Trevor asked in horror. But Steve wasn't going to answer. He started to act. Turbine break. Steve again used a well-known technique, striking Trevor. Following Trevor, a pillar of fire rose from which he was thrown upward. Steve did not stop, acting until the last. "That's not all," Steve added and used the technique, a dozen sharp angles. Steve attacked Trevor again, throwing him up with a fiery beam. The blow was strong and caused a lot of damage. Everyone who watched this could not even move. Steve's team mentally prayed for him to finally win. Team 3A was worried about their leader. Trevor fell from a great height. The blow was hard. He remained lying there, unable to move due to his injuries and pain. Boss! The guys from Squad 3A immediately rushed to Trevor. They were worried if he was okay. "Victory!" Rebecca shouted at that time, also rushing to Steve. She was followed by Lily and Leo. Trevor had already been brought to consciousness. "I didn't expect this. You used all your strength to make sharp angles." Trevor turned to Steve in a weak voice. "I would have died if I had not done this." Steve answered him, holding his wounded chest with his hand. "Brother Steve, I will finish your wounds right now," Lily said, running up to him, offering her help. Steve noticed Leo behind him. He stood silently and looked at him. Steve turned his head towards him. "Please don't hurt the boss." Thanks to the three brothers, we were not killed at Luogi College. The guys from Squad 3A begged not to harm Trevor. "Even though we are useless, and we belong to the weakest class in Luogi College, but they never complained." 3A, This is our shelter and home. Please don't kill the boss." One of them began to cry. "We beg you!" They all fell to their knees in front of Steve, begging for mercy. Steve, Rebecca, and Leo and Lily could not understand what was happening. They looked at Team 3A in surprise. "Get up, you are useless!" Trevor shouted at the guys when he saw them kneeling in front of Steve. "At first, my second and third brothers fought with their bare hands, risking their lives to fight for a small territory for 3A. He shouted, not wanting to see such behavior. "Even though we are the smallest group here, we still have our dignity. Get out of my way! I can still fight!" Trevor tried to get up so as not to bow to anyone. "Big brother!" Trevor heard his brother's voice from somewhere nearby. When he turned his head, he saw his brother, the second leader. "Second brother?" Trevor asked in surprise, not believing his eyes. But his brother was in front of him. He was almost completely bandaged, but alive. "Brother, they helped me recover. When I woke up and didn't find anyone near me, I hurried here." The second leader, Ben, began to explain to Trevor. "You didn't kill my second brother?" Trevor asked Steve in disbelief. "Then, if I had allowed him to lie there, his injury would have been life-threatening." Steve answered him. "I already beat him. I had no reason to kill him." Steve answered he was not cruel as everyone thought about him. Trevor rose from the ground and stood in front of Ben. He looked a little confused and guilty. "Third brother, I'm sorry. I lost." Trevor bowed before Ben. He lowered his eyes, feeling defeated. "I lost." Trevor could not yet stand normally, and he was supported by several people, including his brother Ben. "Where is my sister? Bring her back!" Rebecca shouted to the two leaders. "Your sister, she was—" Ben began to explain something inaudibly, lowering his head. Everyone who was near him began to behave strangely. "She was what? Where is she? What with her?" Rebecca's patience was running out. She demanded an immediate answer. Ben wanted to answer something, but Trevor stopped him. "Rebecca, listen to me," Trevor said, a little embarrassed. "Brother." Ben turned to him. Sadness and something else were visible on his face. Steve and Rebecca waited silently for an answer. "Your sister is fine, don't worry," Trevor answered, lowering his head and clenching his hands into fists. "Then where is she?" the girl asked excitedly. Her heart was jumping out of her chest with excitement. "Listen, there is a lot of misunderstanding between us. I love you. You know, I'm not a romantic, and I don't do cute things." Trevor had to muster all his courage to finally confess. "Even so, you cannot touch my sister by threatening me, and even if someone mocks me." The girl was at first embarrassed by his words, but after a minute her emotions changed to anger. "Your sister, I invited her, but didn't tie her up. It was just a ploy by my subordinates to surprise me. Third brother went to you without my permission, then there was a misunderstanding." Trevor finally explained everything. "I want to see you alone," Trevor said to Rebecca, which made her a little confused. A minute later, Trevor already looked angry. He looked angrily at Steve and his company, looking for Leo. "This guy killed my third brother." All his anger was addressed specifically to him. Leo just watched silently without saying anything in response. "And later you came to our gate, and as a boss, I did not forget to explain to my subordinates." Trevor did not finish. Someone interrupted him. "We apologize for this," Trevor finally squeezed out. "We also ask for forgiveness," Steve added on his own behalf, apologizing for everyone. "This happened because our partner was in a hurry," Steve added, looking sideways at Leo. Trevor and Ben immediately became aggressive as they watched Leo. They wanted him to take revenge for their brother whom he killed. "Little sister, why are you here? What's happened?" Trevor and Ben immediately parted when they heard the voice of Sister Rebecca. She walked straight towards her, not paying attention to everyone around her. Younger sister? Steve, Leo, and Lily were very surprised when they finally met Rebecca's sister. She was a very sweet girl, dressed like a child, in a beautiful bright dress and a pink bow on her head. "Are you okay, sis?" Rebecca immediately rushed to Anna, examining her for injuries or abrasions, but the girl was fine. "What should I say? Here I eat, drink well, and sleep well. It's much safer here than our home at Luoga College," Anna answered joyfully, reassuring Rebecca. "What the hell is this?" Steve thought while watching all this. And, "Sister, I have a request," Anna said, a little unsure. "I want to be with the second leader." Anna walked up to Ben and hugged him, resting her head on his shoulder. Now, Steve, Lily, and Leo were in real shock. They widened their eyes in surprise, opening their mouths slightly. "We both love each other and have the same taste when it comes to food," Anna said joyfully, remembering her favorite dishes, which Ben also liked. My beautiful fatty, Ben, leaning towards Anya, whispered, from which sparks lit up in her eyes and they began to spin around, hugging each other. Now, along with Steve, Lily, and Leo, Rebecca was also in shock. What she saw made her jaw drop. She couldn't understand what was happening here. Ha ha! Interesting? Everyone immediately fell silent when they heard someone laugh. Behind Steve and Rebecca, someone flew up and landed on the ground. What an interesting game! Fred stood in front of them, and behind him was his fighting military spirit. Fred? Steve asked. He didn't expect to see him here. Fred looked over at Steve, smiling at him a little. You have again suffered from too serious a wound, Fred finally said, seeing Steve's wound. So it seems like you're not having the best of times. Fred's gaze moved to Leo, who only closed his eyes. Great, let's go. Mission accomplished, Fred said joyfully to everyone present, spreading his arms to the sides. Mission over, Steve said quietly. Yes, it is. There's nothing else to see there, Fred confirmed. Let's go back. I have something to tell you. Fred turned and headed towards the exit. Steve, Leo, Lily, and Rebecca remained standing, looking after him. Steve and his entire team followed Leo. Trevor, Ben, and the rest of 3A stood and watched them go. But Trevor suddenly screamed, Stand! You are their teacher, right? He turned to Leo. What do you need? Leo stopped and turned his head towards Trevor. He looked interested. What does he want from him? This man I will die. Trevor was enveloped in wild horror, but he himself could not understand why. His fighting spirit was already behind him. Trevor looked very strange. He was in some kind of stupor. Oh, it's time to go back. Let's go, Leo said calmly without even turning around. Everyone calmly supported him and headed towards the gate. They left. Trevor also stood in place. His eyes widened, and he himself looked very angry. Scary! Trevor shouted after them. Steve and Rebecca turned to look at him. You and blue-haired people are different, Trevor said, turning to Steve. Steve didn't answer him. He silently looked at Trevor and thought about something. Leo stood in his favorite place, on the balcony. He simply looked into the distance, lost in his thoughts. Steve collapsed as soon as he returned. Of course, his body had reached its breaking point. Fred said from the doorway as he entered Leo's room. You seem sad, Fred said, coming closer to Leo and looking at him. Your promise. I don't have time to play family games. Leo calmly answered his question. You really are a stubborn guy, Fred said, scratching his head. You know about the weapon of the spirit. This is a unique life spirit weapon that can only be summoned by a high-level war spirit, said Fred. Leo looked at Fred questioningly. He was very surprised. I can give it to you, Fred said with a smile on his face, waiting for Leo's answer. Steve was lying in his room. He was still very weak and almost did not regain consciousness. Next to him were Lily and Rebecca. Brother Steve's body, I'll just check on him, Lily said, wiping him of dirt with a damp cloth. External damage has been restored, but internal wounds are still present. Lily didn't finish. Steve let out a quiet sigh, but his eyes were still closed. His body has reached its limit. I really don't know how he's still holding on, Lily said sadly. She was very worried about him and did everything she could. What a terrifying man, Rebecca said, admiring Steve's courage and strength. He needs a good rest. Lily, take care of him. Rebecca walked up to Steve and touched his face with her hands. Then Rebecca moved her face a little closer to his and kissed Steve on the cheek. Lily watched them silently all this time. Thank you, the girl whispered, looking at Steve. Then she walked away and headed towards the exit of the room. Big sister, where are you going? Asked a worried Lily when Rebecca touched the doorknob. I will practice. Recently I realized that I am still too weak, Rebecca answered without turning around. To survive in this world, we must become stronger, Rebecca added and opened the door to go out. But at the last second, Rebecca turned and said goodbye to Steve and Lily. She really hoped that she would meet them again very soon. In the office of the deputy director, Rose and the director of the college were sitting. They were discussing something. Rose had a letter in her hands. The competition at Luogi College will begin the day after tomorrow afternoon. You will lead the group, Rose said to the director, opening the letter. He calmly drank tea, on the contrary. It was evening in the country of Li. The lights were still on in the building of the supreme ruler. The workers were going to discuss the Luoga College competition. A representative of the Li country and a state councilor entered the office of the main ruler. I brought the report, sir. Sunset Academy received an invitation to participate in the Li Country Academy competition, the woman said to the supreme representative of the country, Li Qishan. And what is their answer? He asked. They accepted the invitation. As you expected, Sunset Academy would participate, Country State Councilor Lee replied. This is a list of 4 proposed participants. The advisor handed the Supreme Representative a piece of paper with the names of the participants. He just looked at the piece of paper and threw it on the table. He was thinking about something. Phoenix, like I said, you'll regret this, he finally said, smiling. Execute Plan B, he ordered his people when he calmed down his laughter a little from anticipation. Oh, despite the fact that the weather here is artificial, it is very cozy here, Steve thought, lying on a soft bed, a bird sitting next to him. Even the breeze is warm. He was still asleep, so he could not understand whether it was true or a dream. Rise and shine, Steve heard someone's voice and jumped up in bed, scaring the baby bird. Enemy! The guy shouted, moving away from his sleep a little and looking around. Enemy? Do I look like an enemy? Rose stood in front of Steve, leaning on a cane. The guy came to his senses a little and calmed down. Granny Gaia? Why are you here? He asked. Call me Associate Dean. She ordered him, still standing in front of his bed. You completed the useless mission Fred assigned you, so I came to check on you. Rose answered and sat down on the edge of his bed. I heard that this time you did not lose consciousness, she asked Steve with interest, turning her head towards him. Steve didn't know what to answer. He hesitated a little and squeezed his hand. This topic was always difficult for him, and he had difficulty finding words. Every time I feel this, it seems like incredible power is coming out of me, but... He squeezed the sheet even more tightly, and his face began to express either anger or aggression. This is unbearable, he shouted. His power brought him pain, and he could not control it yet. Rose listened silently without interrupting him. Steve, you are unique. Your strength is incredibly shocking, Rose finally said, but she kept silent about something, turning her head away from him. Why? Is it because of my father? The guy asked seriously. He didn't want anything to be hidden from him. No, it's because you are unique. After some time, Rose finally answered. You cannot control your body, simply because there is an incredibly great power within you. When you lose your mind, it controls you, Rose explained. But now, I was surprised because this thing didn't take the blunt up. However, something bad can still happen, the old lady added. Sorry, Granny Gaia, Steve apologized to her. I don't blame you, she answered. This is the only thing I can do for you. It should suppress this kind of force at critical moments, but it will continue to destroy your mind. Rose pointed her index finger at Steve, and a yellow glow appeared from it. Endless golden silk of God's hand, she said, touching the guy's forehead with the tip of her finger. A bright yellow light penetrated Steve's head. It warmed him from the inside, and a pleasant warmth spread throughout his body. Then, an electric discharge ran through the body, not big at all, it was a little unpleasant, but Steve endured it. Small sparks flew around him from this force. A rune appeared on Steve's forehead, a star inside a circle. It was a rune representing the endless golden silk of God's hand, which should help him with his power. Rose watched with pity in her eyes Steve's reaction. She knew it was about to get a little worse, but he must endure it. The guy's eyes lit up, and he began to turn into that monster that is always next to him when he is angry. Nearby, when someone threatens him and hurts him, he felt wild pain. His monster growled. The guy could no longer stand it and started screaming, turning over on the bed from side to side. Granny Gaia, this hurts! Steve shouted, wanting this to end quickly. A few minutes later, everything stopped. Steve, in a half-bent position, could not catch his breath. He still felt pain all over his body and was shaking a little. Steve, you are destined to suffer, Rose said sadly, watching him. Steve, out of resentment, shouted so loudly that his voice echoed in the street, spreading in the wind. Fred and Leo stood opposite each other in complete silence. Hey, why did you bring me here? Do not waste my time. Finally, unable to bear it, Leo said. Ready? Fred finally asked Leo, still standing in front of him. He was in no hurry. As far as I know, spiritual weapons can only be given after your spirit reaches an advanced level, said Leo. If only... Leo thought about it and didn't finish. If only what? Fred asked, unable to resist. Unless you have killed 100 high-level war spirits, then you need to extract the spirit to do. Leo did not finish. Spiritual stone, spot on. Fred finished for him and looked intently at Leo. He extended his hand, opening it, and in his palm lay a small stone, an artifact. It shone with a blue color that increased in intensity. Leo moved closer to Fred to see the artifact in his hand. Leo was very surprised. How many people have you killed? Leo asked, still looking at the stone in Fred's hand. Much more than needed. I forgot. Fred answered, smiling cheerfully, rejoicing at Leo's reaction and proud of himself. Each war spirit has enough energy to make a spirit stone. By absorbing it to a certain level, you can even upgrade your own. Fred answered, still smiling. But because there is a rule that no one can kill a hero, I spent a lot of time on this spiritual stone. Fred took the artifact with 2 fingers and brought it closer to look, admiring it. Leo still stood opposite, waiting for Fred's further explanation, but he was in no hurry. He liked to play for time and keep the intrigue going, even though this stone will not help you achieve more. Fred moved a little closer to Leo. It is enough to condense your spirit weapon. Squeezing the stone in his hand tighter, Fred jumped up to Leo to touch it. Leo didn't expect the attack, so he was a little confused. At the last second, when Fred's hand with the stone almost touched Leo, he dodged to the side, avoiding the touch. Leo jumped away from Fred a little. Turning his back to him, he was about to run, but Fred reached him in one leap and hit him with his hand with a stone right in his back. Let me see your spiritual weapon. Having said this, Fred raised Leo, whose hand was holding the artifact above his head. The director of Luogi College looked into the reception room where Steve lived. Where's the door? Looking around, the director asked about the very door that was knocked down in the battle with Team 3A. Didn't she say that we would meet here? Where is this old woman? The director said, clutching his head with his hand and rolling his eyes, referring to Rose when he saw no one in the room. Do the other 2 participants live here? Asked the director, turning his head towards 2 more college students who remained standing in the doorway. Yes, 4 of us will take part in the Lee Country Academy competition tomorrow, said one of the guys. They still did not dare to go inside the room. Hey, is anyone here? The director shouted when a little time had passed and no one had appeared in the room yet. What the hell is going on? Asked another student, scratching his head and looking around. Suddenly, in one of the rooms, the door creaked from there. Lily came out in her pajamas. Excuse me, who are you looking for? The girl asked in a sleepy voice, looking at those present in the room. I'm Lily. She bowed before the director, introducing herself. Oh, I remember you. You were that little girl next to Leo. The director said, smiling at her, remembering their first meeting. Hello, baby, you are so cute. Sitting down next to the girl, the director stroked her head, causing a blush to appear on the girl's cheeks. The director heard a cat meow from Lily's room. He turned his head in that direction and saw a small red kitten heading towards them. He immediately remembered where he had seen this kitten and screamed in horror. He knew who this red cat could belong to, and this did not make him happy at all. Aren't you Fred's cat? The director asked, lifting the cat by the skins and looking closely at his eyes. Is something wrong with my cat? Fred asked, quietly and unnoticeably creeping up to the director from behind. In surprise, the director jumped a little in place. Fred, why are you here? The director shouted, pointing his index finger at Fred, the cat still in his hand. War hero of the highest rank? Shouldn't I have discovered it? Thought one of the students. When did he get here? The second student thought in surprise. Since when are you ready to harm such small animals? Freddie asked the rector, smiling. He was very amused by the expression on his face. It's only because it's yours, answered the director, hugging the cat to himself. He looked angry. It doesn't matter. I must maintain the director's respect without paying any attention to you. Finally, calming down and straightening his hair, he said. Leo entered the room. He looked slightly confused as to what was going on here. Fred bent down to pet his cat. Oh, you're back, young master! Seeing Leo, Lily shouted joyfully. Oh, so you're here. The only thing we're missing is Steve. Scratching his chin, the director threw his hand on Leo's shoulder. Something is wrong with you. The director took a closer look at Leo. He was a little confused and distant. From the minute he was here, he did not utter a word. He did something again, thought the director, looking towards Fred, who was stroking his red kitten. You two are always so loud when you bump into each other. The director and everyone present immediately turned their heads towards the voice. Rose stood in the doorway, leaning on her cane. She looked closely at everyone present in the room. Hello, Deputy Dean. Everyone who was in the room bowed their heads in front of her, welcoming her. Rose looked at Leo. He still looked confused and didn't say a word. Something strange was happening to him. This is the first time we've met, right? Fred, Rose asked, watching the guy with interest. Leo said nothing in response. He silently looked into her eyes. Rose also looked at him carefully, trying to understand. Rose walked up to Fred, who was still playing with his ginger kitten. She stopped in front of him. Fred looked up at her and smiled. Rose just sighed loudly without saying anything else. Steve finally entered the room. He looked around at everyone present. Everyone just stared back at Steve. "There are so many people here," Steve said. Then his gaze caught on Fred. He was a little serious. Fred saw the symbol on Steve's forehead. "Okay, it looks like everyone has arrived. I'll tell you everything right now." Rose began, when everyone present turned their attention from Steve to her. "All of you will take part in the Lee Country College tournament." Everyone gathered in a circle when Rose began to fill them in on the matter. Even Fred, taking the cat on his shoulder, joined the others. Then Fred and the cat went to the sofa and collapsed on it, placing the redhead on his feet. Rose and the director joined him on the couch. "In a tournament between colleges? I've never heard of this before." Steve was indignant, but Rose interrupted him. "I say shut up and listen carefully." She barked back at him. After that, everyone began to listen to her carefully without interrupting. Lowey College was invited to this tournament, and the other colleges sent 4 each to the competition, Rose said. "Only 200 colleges. Don't underestimate your opponents," she warned everyone present. 200? Are all colleges in the country participating? Asked one of the students who was supposed to participate in the competition. He was furious because this meant less chance of winning. "Correct. Now I will introduce you to all the members of your team," Rose calmly responded to his indignation. "This thing, Steve, is the son of a wanted criminal who fled to Logi." Rose pointed a finger at Steve. "What do you mean by this thing?" Steve thought. "Ah, the son of a wanted criminal," laughed one of the guys, who also had to participate in the college competition. Steve looked at him askance. "Which criminal?" he asked Steve, who was standing next to him, and he clearly didn't like it, but the guy didn't know what he was talking about. "Leo from the Jishi clan." Rose pointed her index finger at Leo, who stood silently all this time and simply lowered his gaze to the floor. Lily was next to him, and she was concerned about her master's behavior. "Leo? Is it the second strongest clan in the country? I didn't expect that a person from such a noble family would come here," said one of the guys, having fun with what was happening. "Did you come to Logi College to hide some secrets?" The guy walked up to Leo and put his hand on his shoulder. "Don't touch me," Leo said sternly to the guy, looking askance at him. The guy took a step away from him. "As I already said, not very friendly. You seem easier to get along with." The guy greeted Steve with his hand. "If you interrupt me again, I will kill you." Rose hit the floor with her stick and looked angrily at everyone present. How aggressive she is, everyone thought, standing at attention in front of Grandma. The thing that every other college is giving up is called brutal steel squash. This is Dave. Rose pointed her finger at the same guy who had just annoyed everyone. "This thing!" Granny Rose again pointed her index finger at one of those present in the room. "The murderer who escaped here is an educated butcher, Tony. It was a guy with long blonde hair, another participant in the upcoming tournament. Hello, everyone. Please treat me kindly." Tony smiled and waved to everyone present. Leo and Steve immediately noticed him. He seems like a pretty nice person. Steve thought about Tony. "And this guy, you all already know him, Principal Sam." Rose pointed her finger at the director, who was sitting next to her on the couch, crossing his arms over his chest. "Principal of Luogi College and will lead the team," Rose continued. Sam winked at everyone, smiling. "Don't you dare act nice in front of me." Unexpectedly for everyone, Rose attacked Sam. "Did you listen to everything carefully?" Holding Sam by the collar, Rose turned to the guys, carefully examining everyone. Leo, Steve, Dave, and Tony lowered their heads. They were worried that Rose would attack them. "I'm one of the judges, so I'm going too," she said, finally letting go of Sam and sitting down on the couch. "Can I come with you?" Fred suddenly intervened in the conversation, asking Rose for permission. She looked at him askance. "Even if I don't agree, you'll still come, right?" she asked with a heavy sigh. "Thank you, Associate Dean," Fred told her, smiling widely. "I don't agree. Why can he come?" The director was indignant. He couldn't stand Fred, so his presence always made him angry. "Don't agree with what?" Rose asked, getting up from the couch. "No matter what, our Associate Dean, wise and decisive, you always make perfect decisions. The respect I feel is like a turbulent river that overflows every year." The director fell to his knees in front of her. He didn't want her to attack him again. "Okay, finish this," Rose said and waved her hand, imitating wiping away a tear. "Get ready, we leave this evening," Rose added when everyone calmed down a little. Evening came. Stars appeared in the sky. Lights were burning in the windows of the buildings. A spaceship appeared in the sky. Inside the ship was the entire group that took part in a tournament between colleges. "Not bad. I didn't think Luogi College had such a high-end unmanned ship," Dave said, looking around. "To be precise, this type of unmanned vehicle is not cheap at all." Sam added on his own. "Of course! Did you think the Luogs were as poor as church mice?" "Our president indeed." But the director did not finish and stopped mid-sentence. Rose kicked him. In pain, he covered his mouth with his hand so as not to scream. Steve sat a little further. He held a piece of paper in his hand and carefully read what was written on it. "Steve, there are a lot of things there that you have to find on your own. Next time you come back, I will tell you about your father." It was written on the sheet. The guy thought a little. A few hours later, the ship finally landed at its destination. The entire crew left the ship. They were looked at from side to side. "Oh my God! She's so big!" Sam shouted, looking straight ahead. Everyone immediately turned their attention to where Sam pointed. In front of them was the golden arena of Lee Country. She really was big. "All here. Welcome to the Lee Country College Tournament, which occurs every 3 years." The girl spoke into the microphone, greeting everyone who arrived. "The tournament has already begun. Lee Country's Golden Arena, also called the Four Golden Corners." The team headed towards the entrance. "She definitely deserves her name. Don't lose, otherwise I'll be embarrassed," Dave shouted. "So noisy," said Leo. 200 colleges?" Steve was a little shocked, which made his eyes widen. 800 people, Tony said, moving closer to Steve, who began counting the number of players on his fingers. "Now you've even forgotten how to use your brain?" Leo asked him. "Well, everyone shut up. Let's go inside," Rose said, heading towards the entrance of the arena first. Fred stood behind her and smiled. Sam looked at him askance. A guard stood at the entrance to the arena and checked invitation cards. Sam approached him, showing his ticket. "Are you injecting loogie?" A security guard, carefully examining their participation ticket. Everyone standing nearby began to whisper. "Is this the one that is not controlled by anyone? Why did they come to the Lee Country tournament? I saw something in their hands. It seems that they were invited." The conversations of those present could be heard. "It's amazing that such a pathetic college came to participate." None of the other colleges were thrilled that they would have to compete with Lowy College. "Any problems?" Rose approached the guard. Her face did not express any emotions, but it was clear from her eyes that she wanted to kill someone. No, please come in." The guard answered her with a welcoming smile and pointed his hand towards the entrance. "Is Luoga's reputation so terrible?" Steve asked Fred, who was standing next to him. He only laughed in response and replied, "Disgusting." As the Luogi College team walked into the arena, shouts could be heard from everywhere. "Here they come. This is them. Luogi College they come. This is Luogi College." After passing through a small corridor and going up the steps, they came to the entrance to the arena. It was so big that Steve opened his mouth in surprise. There were a lot of people in the arena. They all had to participate in the competition. "So many opponents, I'm already wound up," Dave said, rolling up his sleeves. "There are so many people here because this is a national-level tournament," said the director. "At such events, clans and sponsors select talented participants. This is a great opportunity for beginners, but also for veterans," Sam explained to the team. "In any case, with military heroes like us, there is no chance." Fred interrupted the director, to which he ordered not to interrupt him. "Now it all depends on you two. I'll go to the judges' area. It'll all start soon," Rose said, turning to Sam and Fred. "Don't disgrace Luoga College." Heading to the judges' area, Rose finally said to the guys. Leo, Dave, Tony, and Steve watched as Rose left. They were looking forward to when it all started and they could show what they were capable of. "Okay, let's go find our seats," Sam suggested, calling everyone closer to him. "Leo, long time no see?" The guy heard a familiar voice opposite him. He raised his head to look. In front of them stood a team, several boys and girls. The two teams carefully examined each other, each assessing the enemy. "First of the big three, Charlie," said Lily. Steve had also heard something about him. None of them were pleased with such rivals. "I'm Charlie," the guy who stood in the center of his team finally said. "First of the big three?" asked Steve. He tensed a little, feeling the tension between those present. It's amazing that I was able to meet the members of Zhenhong College as soon as I arrived. The director intervened in the conversation. He crossed his arms over his chest and closely examined each of the team members who stood opposite them.
This is Zhenhong, the most respected college in the country, Li. They specialize in training special people for the government. Participants from other teams began to admire Charlie and his team.
This guy is from the most respected college? Did he come too? It seems that the winner is now determined. Conversations could be heard on both sides. Luga College? So out loud about their invitation was truthful. Another familiar guy approached Steve's team. It seems that this time their team will be led by Director Sam, he said when he stopped opposite. Oh, Fred is here too, the guy said, turning his attention to Fred, who stood behind the director. I would like to know, a girl from Charlie's team intervened in the conversation, turning to Lily. Steve, standing next to Lily, also tensed a little, feeling how worried she was. After your sister died, did you inherit her pitiful strength? Asked a girl from Charlie's team. She came closer to Lily and sat down opposite her. Lily looked down and looked worried. Lily looked up at her. She was upset, and it was clear from her that this topic was not very pleasant to her. We are both from medical clans, but you guys from Lingxi are really annoying. The girl propped her head up with her hand as she said this. Hey, can't you see that Lily doesn't like you? Steve came closer to the girl and decided to stand up for her. Stay away from her, he told her warningly. It was clear from his eyes that he was not joking. Oh, how attentive, the girl answered melodiously, looking at Steve carefully. May, come back. Charlie called the girl. I interrupted her fun with Steve and Lily. The girl went to her team. Dave started laughing. He thought the name May was very funny. I don't think you look like a man. Dave was still laughing. Steve and Tony approached him, not quite understanding what was making him so happy. Someone ran past Charlie, who was standing opposite, but he didn't even have time to notice anything, although most likely he didn't even care. You are too rude. One guy from Charlie's team ran up to Dave and hit him with his fist. He stood up for May. You will answer for this. Dave shouted at him and was about to attack him back to hit back. Dave got ahead of Tony and rushed forward at the guy, leaving him behind. Tony ran up to the guy from Charlie's team and hit him in the stomach with all his might, causing him to fly to the side without keeping his balance. But the guy was not weak and landed on his feet, showing his agility and readiness for battle. The guy from Charlie's team straightened out and ran towards Steve's team. Everyone was closely watching what was happening. Two more guys from Charlie's team also decided not to stand still. They ran after the first guy who stood up for May. They all headed towards Steve's team, most likely to fight. When Steve and Dave noticed this, they knew they needed to act, so they started running towards him. Leo, let me have a look. Charlie watched all this from the side, deciding not to take part in it for now, but then he noticed Leo, who began to approach him, and he became curious. You've become stronger, haven't you? When Leo approached Charlie, he asked him. Leo called upon his power, and blue flames appeared around him, ready to attack at any moment. They are fighting! Someone shouted from the crowd. The two teams, Steve and Charlie, approached each other. Everyone had already chosen their opponent. They were ready to fight. Without stopping, he waved his hand to harm his opponent, who turned out to be Charlie. He didn't have time to do anything. Charlie was already standing next to him and quietly told him, Leo, your speed is disappointing. Leo stood motionless. Sticking out of his chest was an arrow of fire that Charlie had struck him with. The next second, Leo's body shattered into blue fragments, leaving nothing behind. Fake, Charlie said, noticing that Leo was standing behind him, safe and sound. He used a trick to distract attention. At this time, Steve was fighting with the same guy who stood up for May and started the battle. Steve's hand was already engaged in fighting force, and he raised it to strike when the guy ran at him. Steve punched that guy, hoping he could beat him. Well, after a few seconds, he didn't think so anymore. His fighting spirit did not show itself, and he hit the guy again, using all his strength, but this also did not give him anything. Then Steve decided to try another way. He jumped up and kicked. The guy covered his face with his arms crossed, then sharply lowered them, sweeping away everything within a radius of several meters near him. What a weak spirit, he said, turning to Steve. Realizing that he did not cause him any harm, which means that they have minimal chances of winning, Dave and Tony headed towards their opponents. They were fast and agile. Their opponents were also not to be underestimated. Running closer to his opponent, Tony kicked him in the knee and ran on to the next one. When the guy who was hit in the knee by Tony moved away from the pain a little, he looked forward. He saw Dave in front of him, who extended his hand to him, where instead of his nails there were long claws. There was one more guy left, and Tony headed towards him. The guy ran towards him and threatened. "I am your opponent!" Tony said, jumping up to him, spreading his arms to the sides, and using his strength against the guy from Charlie's team. A moment later, Tony, with the help of his fighting spirit, began to strike the guy many times. He was super fast, and his opponent could only cover himself from the blows. A fight between Tony and his opponent was stopped by a member from another college, scattering them to each side. He was taller and stronger than them, so it didn't take him long. Dave and his opponent were also stopped. It was a guy with long black hair and 2 sticks with which he dispersed the guys. "Our Lifeng College will not allow riots here," said the guy who dispersed Tony and his opponent, putting his hands to his sides and laughing. "Lifeng College? Second college in the country!" the guys shouted from the crowd, realizing that they had fewer advantages compared to this college. "I am the leader of Lifeng College, James. Greetings to all." He laughed and raised his hand in a welcoming gesture, addressing everyone. "And James still looks arrogant," said one of the guys. "Oh, Michael," James said, turning to him. There was hostility between them. "It's so awkward that I don't have any good feelings for you," James said, mocking Michael, spreading his arms to the sides. "Also, no personal conflicts," he warned, still laughing, raising his index finger up. "You guys don't look down on anyone," he taught the others. "Lifeng College is indeed a training combat barracks, such discipline," said Sam. "I just wanted to let the students warm up." As if making excuses, Sam spread his arms to the sides, explaining what had just happened between the 2 colleges. The director turned his head towards Fred, intending to tell him something, but there was nothing there. Fred was no longer near him. This Fred! Sam got angry. He already disliked Fred, and he was very annoyed by him for some unknown reason. James said nothing more. He stood silently in place. Members from his college started joining him. The first guy to appear next to him was a guy with long black hair that was tied into a long ponytail. He had an evil look, which immediately showed his attitude in this competition. A second later, 3 more guys joined them. They all looked confident and cocky. "Okay, you are here," said the guy with long hair, addressing his team when they were all already assembled. "Are you Adam?" Everyone present immediately stared at him. Lily was surprised when she recognized him. "As a member of one of the great families, have you stirred up trouble again? Isn't this awkward?" Adam turned to Charlie. "You, Adam? As a member of the 3rd family, you worry too much about other people's problems." Charlie answered him, lowering his gaze a little. "This guy is the 3rd family in the country of Lee?" Steve asked. "I'm just trying to follow the rules of the tournament, Charlie," Adam calmly answered him. "Leo, I heard that you are at Luoga College." Now Adam turned his attention to Leo. "And yet you are again among the garbage," Adam said to Leo over his shoulder as he walked away. "None of your business," Leo answered him, closing his eyes in anger. "He deliberately makes things worse," Adam said, referring to Leo. Okay, let's go. The tournament will start soon," James said, calming Adam and his squabble with Leo. Participants from Lifeng College went to the place where the tournament was to begin. "Meet me in the arena," Adam finally said, turning to Steve's team. "So funny," said one of the guys from Charlie's team. Everyone else was serious about competing. "Our students are a little cocky. Sorry about that." Michael apologized to Steve's team, bowing slightly before them. "Goodbye, guys from Luoga," Michael said finally, but then stopped and added, "I hope to meet again in the arena." He clearly didn't mean anything good by saying this. Charlie and Michael's team also headed towards the arena, leaving Steve's team behind. "Don't disappoint me, loser," Dave said, passing by Leo. May was the last to cast a sympathetic glance at them and joined her team, heading towards the arena. "Lily, Steve turned to the girl, but she understood him perfectly. "They are both from Zhenhong and Lifeng colleges, the 1st and 2nd colleges in the country." Lily answered him. "The 3 largest families in the country, Shanggong, Jai, and Jing. Adam and Charlie are the 2nd children in their families." Lily began to tell about her rivals. "They are also enemies of the Leo family," she added, her face expressing dissatisfaction mixed with anger. "Leo, he went through hardships when he was younger," Steve thought, watching Lev and his emotions. "Don't let me meet them, otherwise I will kill them," you shouted angrily, Dave, looking after the 2 colleges. "The first round lottery is about to begin. We invite all colleges to gather on the field," said a voice into the loudspeaker. "Okay, stop behaving like that. It's all started, boys." Sam turned to his team, gathering his courage. "Participants, please pay attention. The first round of the Lee Country tournament has officially begun. the voice said again into the loudspeaker. All participants held their breath a little in anticipation. Each of them assessed their opponents and their strength. There were also those who were too self-confident. "Ha ha! My blood is boiling," Dave said, stretching his hands. He was looking forward to the start to show what he could do. "Shut your mouth!" Turning to Dave, the director shouted and slapped him on the shoulder, causing the guy to grimace a little. "Welcome to the Lee Country Tournament." A man in a red tuxedo appeared in front of the participants. He had a red bow tie on his neck and a top hat on his head. He had a microphone in his hand, and he was dancing. "I am the presenter, Mr. Henry." He almost sang into the microphone, raising his hands up. Everyone stared at him in surprise. "So how? My name is funny, isn't it?" asked Mr. Henry, two front teeth sticking out funny from his mouth like a rabbit's. "What kind of idiot?" Sam asked without emotion, watching Mr. Henry's performance. Next to him, Dave couldn't help but laugh, covering his mouth with his hand. Laughter from the participants was heard from all sides. They shouted his name. He was clearly able to lift everyone's spirits and defuse the situation a little. "Why do you always laugh at other people's names?" The director slapped Dave on the head again, but the guy still couldn't stop laughing. "Please listen to the rules for the first round," Mr. Henry said into the microphone, and waited a few seconds for everyone to calm down. When there was complete silence, Henry walked up to the huge structure behind him and threw the curtain off it. All participants opened their mouths in surprise. As you all may have noticed, here are the names of all the participants in the first round. Mr. Henry sang again into the microphone, making strange movements like a dance. "Your victories and defeats will also be shown on this huge board." He continued his speech. "The first round is a one-on-one battle." He connected his two index fingers in front of him. "One-on-one sounds interesting," Steve said immediately. He liked fighting in this style, and it was nothing new to him. "Pairs will be distributed randomly by our system." Leaning from one side to the other, Mr. Henry sang along. "Since there are 800 participants, the system will give you a number from 1 to 400. Two participants with the same numbers will compete in a duel." Henry continued to make incomprehensible movements when he explained the rules of the tournament. The system was also specially set up to prevent members from the same college from fighting each other. "So don't worry." Henry smiled again, showing his two front teeth. "What?" Dave didn't like it, as did many of the participants. "Is something wrong? Is there something you don't understand?" asked the director, turning to Dave. He wasn't surprised at all. "I didn't understand what he said." Dave was a little confused. "What else did I expect?" the director said, holding his head. "Simply put, if you are number 6, you will fight another number 6. Students from the same college will not receive the same numbers to avoid cheating," the director explained in a serious tone. "Got it?" the director asked again, but they no longer listened to him. Dave, turning to the guys, shouted something. "Who is he going to beat first?" Sam, realizing that they were not listening to him, approached Dave and, unable to resist, hit him. "The loser's name will be changed from red to blue," Mr. Henry continued his speech. "Now, automatic distribution has begun." Raising one hand up, he sang about the beginning of the distribution. On the huge board that was behind Mr. Henry, numbers and letters began to appear in a chaotic order, creating lists. All participants eagerly watched the scoreboard to see who they would have to fight with. Which number will fall to whom? There was complete silence. An inscription appeared on the scoreboard. Steve College, Lowy. Steve realized that he was number 30 and his opponent was also number... Who else has number 30? Steve thought. But a second later, he already saw who had exactly the same number. The name Nick was written on the scoreboard. He also had the number. "It looks like the first round will be easy, with all these weak colleges with no reputation," said the director. "After they are all eliminated, the real tournament will begin," Sam added. "But they can't all be weaklings." Steve objected to him. "This tournament has an age limit, so they are all college freshmen. So their combat skills will not be high either. At your age, almost everyone is a beginner," the director reassured him. "There must be some elite recruits here. If I hadn't gone to college, I wouldn't have had a chance." "Steve," answered the director, "you need to ask your grandmother about this. She chose you." Sam answered him. Steve thought for a bit. He didn't know whether there would be only newcomers or battle heroes here. "Fighters, you got your numbers." Mr. Henry picked up the microphone again. "Please go to the places allocated for your numbers," Mr. Henry said, dancing. Having seen their numbers, the participants began to disperse to their assigned places, awaiting the next instructions. Next to each participant's number was written the number of the hall where the first level of the competition should take place. "Number 30, I'm in the first hall," Steve said and turned to the guys and asked what they were wearing. 67, hall number 2, Tony told him. 245, I'm in 5th, so far away, Dave answered nervously, scratching his head. 333, hall, Leo answered calmly. There was not a single emotion on his face. He and Lily headed towards his hall. Lily turned to the guys and wished them good luck and waved goodbye. "Come on, let's see who comes out first," Dave suggested and headed towards his hall. "Whoever is last is the turtle," Dave shouted without turning around. "I left," Tony replied. "I left too," Steve said, also heading towards his hall number 1. "Guys, everyone come here after you're done," the director shouted after them. Sam turned his head towards the scoreboard and began to look at what number and in which hall his students would be. Hall 1, Sam repeated to himself, heading towards his hall. Around him, the participants dispersed in different directions into their halls. "There is too much space here," Steve thought, coming closer to his move. Following the directional signs in the form of arrows, he headed inside hall number 1. Looking at his feet, Steve did not have time to see that someone was approaching him. He crashed into someone. "Oh, sorry." Finally raising his head up, he began to apologize. A beautiful blonde girl stood in front of him. She was also most likely a contestant. They stood silently for a minute and looked at each other. At this time, the Supreme State Counselor of the country, Lei, stood in his office and looked out the window. Moving away from the window, he picked up documents. These were profiles of all the players who took part in the tournament between colleges. He glanced over Steve's profile. "Everything is in the details, even the fighting spirits. This is very useful information. You're still reliable," Thomas said, continuing to look at the participants' profiles. Thomas addressed Fred, who was sitting calmly on the sofa and drinking tea. It was Fred who got him these forms. "Sorry, I didn't see you," Steve said to the girl he ran into in the corridor of hall number 1. She didn't answer him, and he didn't know what else to tell her. An awkward silence fell between them. "Anything else?" she finally asked. "Look at him with her green, beautiful eyes." "No," he quickly answered. It was clear from him that he was very embarrassed, and he walked around her and moved on. "Which college are you from?" she asked, turning slightly towards him until he went far. "Me? Luoga College, what?" Steve asked, turning slightly to the girl. "College Luog, and—" she repeated quietly, still not taking her eyes off Steve. "What was that?" he thought as she headed towards the exit of the hall. "Hall number 1, it's here. Go ahead." Having cheered up a little, in high spirits he entered the hall where the first competition was to take place. There were many arenas here. "Participant 30, please go to arena," the loudspeaker voice repeated several times. Steve rose from his seat and headed towards his arena. "Participant 30, hurry up. Mr. Steve, student from Luga College." Near arena number 12, there was a guy in a black tuxedo. He had a list in his hands, and he was writing something down. "Hello, I'm number," Steve said, coming closer to him. Yes, I understand. Go already." "Still writing something down," the guy in the suit told him. Steve saw his rival. It was also a young guy who, in response, looked at Steve with contempt. His opponent, Nick, stood on the other side of the arena with his arms folded across his chest. "Put this on. This is a bracelet that will measure your strength." The guy in the suit handed Steve a metal bracelet. "The greater the power, the greater the value. Please don't break this bracelet," the guy in the suit warned Steve. Steve put the bracelet on his wrist. As he closed it, he heard the click of it closing on his hand. "It hurts," Steve said, feeling pain in his head and body. The bracelet measured his strength. A few seconds later, an inscription appeared on the dial of the bracelet. "No class spirit." Steve didn't understand how this could even be. "Is this a joke? 469? You haven't even reached the rank of rookie military hero?" The guy in the suit laughed when he saw this information. "Is Luoga College really crazy?" the guy said, still unable to hold back his laughter. "Luga College, Steve, no class. Spiritual power against Nick. Rookie military hero, Chizhou College, spiritual power." The guy introduced them. Nick looked at Steve and smiled from the other end of the ring. Steve was a little upset. "Do you only have 469? And I thought that Luogi was full of monsters." Nick continued to mock Steve. "I am stronger than you by as much as 100 points. You haven't even reached the rank of rookie military hero. Can you even imagine the difference in our skills?" Nick asked Steve. "Over 100 points, it's like a bull fighting a worm." Nick gave an example. "If you haven't even reached the initial stage," the guy who stood near the ring gave a hand signal that the competition between them had begun. "The fight begins," shouted the guy in the suit. "It's like a father hitting his son, weakling." His military hero was already standing behind Nick. Unexpectedly for Steve, he began to be afraid, probably for the first time in all the cases of contractions. "You will not escape my grasp. This is the ability of my spirit. Absorb your attacks," Nick said to Steve, approaching him with his fighting spirit. Nick jumped up to Steve, swinging his hand to strike, but Steve dodged to the side at the last second. Steve grabbed Nick by the arm and pulled him forward and kneed him right in the head. Nick landed on the ground, slightly recovering from the impact. Steve made him angry. Without thinking for a long time, Nick decided to use a combat technique. Steve stood opposite him, waiting for an attack. "Let's see how you reflect this." "I will end this fight now," Nick shouted to Steve. His fighting spirit blazed with yellow flames. The first destructive fist. Having shouted this, Nick struck Steve with a fist flaming with fire, but Steve stopped him. Steve's hand and Nick's fist come together during a punch. Steve was able to hold off the attack. The second destructive fist. Nick did not give up trying to strike Steve, but Steve was able to stop this blow too. When Nick swung for the third time to hit Steve, he ducked, and all the blows went past him. Did he duck down? Nick thought, where he didn't see Steve in front of him. Such large-scale attacks. "I've seen them thousands of times," Steve told Nick mockingly. "What?" the guy asked. Well, she still continued to attack Steve. "Binding blow," Nick said again, using another fighting technique against Steve. But Steve decided to take action. He struck him. After being hit by Steve, Nick turned over and fell on his back. Everyone who watched the competition opened their mouths in surprise. After all, Steve killed him with one blow. Steve remained standing in his place. Nick was not visible behind the pile of dust that he raised with his fall. So what? 469, one blow was enough. Standing over Nick, Steve told him, referring to his fighting strength. "Steve, number 30, Steve won," the guy standing near the ring finally said in surprise. Everyone present was also very surprised. "Announce the result, Mozart," Leo asked. He was standing over his opponent at that moment. The competitor's body was covered in blue shards that were sticking out of it. "Not even a minute has passed. Look at the poor guy. Is he still alive?" "He's too strong," shouted those watching the competition between Leo and his opponent. "I heard that there was a good fight here. What's happened?" One of the guys missed Leo's entire fight, so he asked the others. Leo now won in less than a minute. The guys who saw him fight whispered. "How strong is he?" asked one of the guys. Leo heard all this but did not show it. He just stood there and waited for further instructions. "Announce the result," Leo asked again. "Number 333, Leo from Luoga College won," said the judge, the same guy in a suit as Steve. What is his spiritual power? At the beginning of the match, it was like 999. This is already a mid-level military hero. This is very difficult, at his age, as expected from the big three. The guys were talking among themselves, watching Leo's fight with his opponent. The doctors had already placed his opponent on a stretcher. "This guy is scary," Leo heard after himself as he left the ring. But I decided not to pay any attention. "You are dangerous!" someone shouted next to Steve. He raised his head to see who decided to disturb him. "Hello!" A girl stood in front of Steve. She looked at him, and this embarrassed him a little. Hello, you really are dangerous. Before the battle, you didn't even prepare anything, only 469 units of spiritual power. And even so, you defeated a stronger opponent than yourself." I smiled sweetly. She began to speak without stopping. "Well, actually, I'm not defenseless," Steve answered, raising his hands up, smiling at the girl. "My name is Chloe. I'm from college in Sujan." The girl introduced herself, still smiling. "Sujan College? Well, hello." Steve extended his hand to her in greeting. "Don't you know about Sujan College?" she asked in surprise. "I don't know much about other colleges, sorry," Steve answered. "Sujan College ranked third in Lai country, the third largest college, after Zhenhong and Laifeng colleges," she told him. "Our college is the cutest and most popular." She began to spin, and she began to spin, and a rainbow appeared above her head. "Even when compared with Laifeng College, the college is no worse," she said. "Wow, that sounds cool." Steve answered, smiling back at her out of politeness. "You don't seem surprised at all." Chloe pouted her lips in resentment, but then her mood quickly changed. "What college are you from?" she asked Steve again, smiling. Lugi College," Steve answered her. "Luoga College," she shouted back. Everyone immediately turned their heads. Steve covered her mouth with his hand. "Hey, be quiet," he asked her. "Luoga College, is it a place filled with bad guys?" "Are you a good guy?" the girl asked him. "No, I'm not bad." He answered a little more rudely than required. She looked at him appraisingly. Then her mood changed again. "Oh, okay, I'll go get some rest before the next battle, Mr. Steve." Chloe waved her hand and walked away from Steve. "So, you don't need to prepare anything for battle?" Steve asked her when she had not yet gone far. "No, because I am also very strong," the girl answered him. The director sat in the arena, overlooking the big screen and drinking tea, watching the results of the competition. He saw one of the numbers light up red. He was a little surprised and then continued to drink tea. "The three great families are truly scary. The tournament started only a minute ago. Number 263 and his opponent." "Not surprising," Sam reasoned out loud, still looking at the scoreboard. "If his opponent is Charlie, then there is nothing surprising," he said about one of the players while drinking tea. Player numbers appeared on the scoreboard again and again, and they were all from the best colleges in Lee Country. Each time Sam peered at the names, looking for one of his own. As I expected, the big three again. The name of Leo or his opponent appeared on the scoreboard. The three great families are truly scary. The first round started about a minute ago. Meeting an opponent like them is pure bad luck. The final round will also be like this. They have already won. Everyone watching began to discuss players from three large families. Why didn't I know that Valkyrie had come too? In terms of strength, she is definitely not inferior to those monsters from the big three. She hasn't started fighting yet. Let's go see. Some of the guys went to look for that same Valkyrie. Leo was the first to return to the director. "Are you back already? This is dangerous." "In less than a minute, the three of you were already back," Sam told him, finishing his tea. Or looking at the scoreboard, she said the names of three brothers. They were all the first to win this tournament. "I'm thirsty too," Leo finally said, watching Sam drink tea. "Brew it yourself," the director shouted to him. "Let me." Lily offered her help. They sat outside under an umbrella, Lily, Leo, and Sam, drinking tea and talking. "Nannies." Lily stuffed pudding behind her cheeks. Then she looked at the results again and was surprised. "Oh, brother Steve won too." The girl jumped up in her chair, rejoicing. Slowly was all Leo said. Steve came running to them. He was glad to see Leo and the director. "Hey!" He was surprised that Leo was already there. "You really are the fastest in the group," Steve finally said, approaching Leo. He just nodded his head silently. "You're not that slow, not bad, Nitso." The director praised Steve. "Brother Steve, have some tea." Lily already brought him a cup, he thanked her. "This is not what I expected from my opponent." "Room 102, Hall 3. Steve, sit down and look," the director suggested to him. "Number 102? Who is this?" "Violet?" Steve asked the director incomprehensibly when this name appeared on the board. "Violet is the strongest student at Suyang College, also known as Valkyrie. She shouldn't be underestimated," said the director. "Suyang College?" Steve asked. He remembered the girl he ran into in the corridor. "Do you know about them?" Sam asked Steve. "I just met someone from their college. I'll go have a look, see you?" Having given Lily a cup of tea, Sam headed towards hall number 3. "Valkyrie, Valkyrie, my goddess, Violet doesn't fight!" A lot of people crowded around the arena. They all shouted something, creating too much noise. "So much," Steve said when he came closer to the ring, where that same Valkyrie should have been. "Is Violet so popular?" Steve said, unable to hear his voice because of the noise. "What did you say? Don't you know Valkyrie?" "Exactly! You are not worthy to see our goddess!" The guy standing nearby shouted to Steve. "Is this her?" Steve thought when he saw the same girl he encountered in the hallway of the hall. He couldn't even imagine how she could fight, all so gentle and sweet. Violet stood in front of her opponent, the crowd around her shouting her name, showing her their devotion. "My name is Tom. It is an honor to fight against you. I will try to give my best." The guy in front of her put his hand to his chest and bowed a little. "Oh, thank you," the girl answered him. The judge announced which colleges they were from and what their strength was. "Violet, be careful," her opponent shouted to her. And then he called on his fighting spirit. "Morale, get a horizontal decapitating blade." The girl called the combat artifact. She twisted around herself and ran at her opponent. Everyone watching her sighed languidly and called her a goddess. Shield form. Her battle artifact immediately turned into a huge shield, protecting itself from her opponent's attack. "Her defense is too strong," said her opponent, trying to hit her with an attack, but it was useless. Hammer shape! Her artifact turned into a hammer from a shield, and she attacked her opponent swinging the same hammer. The girl struck a blow at the enemy, causing him to be slightly muffled, and his fighting spirit scattered in pieces to the sides. The guy screamed. She swung the hammer again, but her opponent went down himself, giving her a chance to win. Violet looked around. She looked so calm and confident. No one would even think that she had just fought if they had not seen it. She has such an unusual spirit. She's so strong, goddess! Everyone watching shouted. You gave in! She turned to the guy she was fighting. If she hadn't stopped, then this guy would. Steve didn't finish. He saw Tony next to him. Tony, how long have you been here? Have you finished yet? Steve asked him. Not so long. Yes, luckily I won. Tony answered him. Let's get back to the team. Tony suggested to Steve. Yes, okay, he agreed, and they headed towards the exit. Tony and Steve took to the main stage. They headed to the place where the director was sitting. Oh, it's all here, Steve said when he saw the director, Leo, Lily, and Dave resting in front of him. What are you doing? Steve asked the director in a boring tone. Oh, you're back. Sam turned his gaze to him. My opponent was pathetic. I got rid of it after a few attacks. It wasn't fun. Dave began to tell. When is the next battle? I'm already tired, Dave said, laughing. Where are you in a hurry? You guys finished too quickly. The others haven't even finished their fights yet, the director told them. After the first round, only 400 people should remain. There must be an announcement, he added. Mr. Steve, this is for you. Lily handed them 2 cups of tea. The participants who won first sat boredly and waited for the results of the first competition. Violet walked up to her team. You are back, one of the girls said joyfully. Violet. Chloe, I met a very interesting person, one of them said. Exactly. Looks like he's from Luoga College, Chloe answered. His name was Steve. He looked stupid. Chloe played on her console while explaining how she met Steve. You guys should try. Our college should become famous, said their teacher.